She offered him $10,000 to pretend to love her for one weekend. He was a broke, grieving widower with a sick daughter and empty pockets. She was a billionaire CEO with parents who wouldn't stop asking about grandchildren. It was supposed to be simple: hold hands, smile for photos, disappear. But when a ruthless corporate rival discovered their arrangement, the fake relationship became a real death sentence. And the only way to survive was to stop pretending. Before we begin this journey, I want to invite you to stay until the very end. If this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and comment below with the city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel across the world. The fluorescent lights in the convenience store bathroom flickered like they were counting down to something Jake Carter couldn't name. He stood at the sink, splashing cold water on his face, watching the droplets slide down cheeks that looked 10 years older than 34. His reflection stared back with hollow eyes, the eyes of a man who had buried his wife 18 months ago and was still trying to remember how to breathe without her. His phone buzzed in his pocket, another reminder, another bill he couldn't pay. Jake dried his face with a paper towel that felt like sandpaper and walked back into the store where he worked the graveyard shift. Minimum wage, no benefits. The kind of job that kept the lights on but couldn't fix the crack in the ceiling or the cough his daughter couldn't shake. Maddie, 6 years old, hair like her mother's, honey blonde and wild, eyes like his, brown and too serious for a child. She was staying with Mrs. Patterson tonight, the elderly neighbor who watched her when Jake pulled these shifts, and even that arrangement was held together with favors and promises Jake wasn't sure he could keep. The door chimed. A customer wandered in, grabbed energy drinks, paid without making eye contact. Jake processed the transaction mechanically, his mind elsewhere. On the medical bills stacked on his kitchen counter, on the landlord's increasingly pointed voicemails, on the parent-teacher conference he'd missed because he couldn't afford to take time off work. This wasn't the life he'd planned. He and Sarah had dreamed of a little house with a backyard. She'd wanted a garden. He'd wanted a workshop. Maddie would have had a swing set and a dog and parents who weren't drowning. But Sarah had gotten sick. Cancer, the quiet kind that didn't announce itself until it was already everywhere. She'd fought for 14 months. Jake had held her hand until the very end, until her grip loosened and her breathing stopped and the hospital room went so quiet he thought he might lose his mind. Now here he was, scanning barcodes at 2 a.m, wondering how much longer he could hold everything together before it all came apart. When his shift ended at 6, Jake drove home in a car that wheezed and rattled like it was begging for mercy. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that felt almost offensive in their beauty. He pulled into the parking lot of his apartment complex, a squat, ugly building with peeling paint and a dumpster that always overflowed, and sat for a moment, gathering the energy to move. His phone buzzed again. This time it was an email notification. Jake almost ignored it. Probably spam, or another collection agency pretending to be friendly. But something made him look, and what he saw made him sit up straighter. Your Craigslist application. Interview requested. He'd forgotten about that. 3 nights ago, in a haze of exhaustion and desperation, he'd scrolled through Craigslist looking for side gigs, anything to bring in extra cash. He'd applied for a dozen things, moving help, handyman services, mystery shopping, without any real hope. But this one had been different. The listing had been short and strange. Seeking presentable male, 30-40, for weekend companion role. No inappropriate expectations. Significant compensation. Discretion required. Jake had almost scrolled past it. It sounded like something illegal or creepy or both. But the phrase significant compensation had glowed in his mind like a neon sign, and he'd fired off a quick reply with his name and phone number before he could talk himself out of it. Now, apparently, someone wanted to interview him. He opened the email. Mr. Carter, thank you for your inquiry regarding my listing. After reviewing your application, I believe you may be a suitable candidate for the position. Please meet me at Café Lumière on Madison Avenue at 11 o'clock a.m. today to discuss the terms. I'll be at the corner table wearing a gray blazer. Arrive on time. R. Vale. No phone number, no additional details. Just an address and an expectation. Jake checked the time. It was 6:23 a.m. He had a few hours to shower, change, and figure out if he was really about to meet a stranger from the internet about a weekend companion role. Every instinct told him this was a bad idea, but every bill on his counter told him he was out of options. He got out of the car. Mrs. Patterson's apartment smelled like lavender and old books. Jake knocked softly, and the door opened to reveal an 80-year-old woman with silver hair and kind eyes that had seen too much of the world's cruelty to be surprised by any of it. "She's still sleeping," Mrs. Patterson whispered, stepping aside to let him in. "Had a rough night. Coughing again." Jake's chest tightened. "Did she—" "She's fine, dear. Just tired. I gave her some honey and water, and she settled down around 3. He moved through the small apartment to the spare bedroom where Maddie slept on a pull-out couch. She looked so small under the blankets, her face peaceful in a way it rarely was when she was awake. Lately, there was always worry in her eyes, a child's awareness that things weren't okay, that Daddy was tired and sad, and the apartment was cold, and the fridge was never quite full enough. Jake knelt beside the couch and brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. She stirred but didn't wake. "I'm sorry, baby," he whispered. "I'm trying." Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway. "You need sleep, Jake. You look like death warmed over." "I know, He hesitated. "I have a meeting this morning. Possible job opportunity." "Oh?" Her eyebrows rose. "Something better than the store?" "Maybe. I don't know yet." He stood, his knees protesting the movement. "Could you watch her for a few more hours? I'll be back by noon." Mrs. Patterson studied him with that penetrating gaze that made him feel like a teenager asking for permission. "Is this legal, whatever you're doing?" "I honestly have no idea," Jake admitted, "but I have to try." She sighed. "Go. I'll make pancakes when she wakes up." Jake kissed Maddie's forehead one more time, thanked Mrs. Patterson for the 100th time, and walked back to his apartment to shower and find the least wrinkled shirt he owned. Café Lumiere was not the kind of place Jake Carter frequented. It occupied the ground floor of a gleaming building on Madison Avenue, all exposed brick and reclaimed wood and coffee that cost more than an hour of his labor. The people inside looked like they belonged there, polished, put together, the kind of people who had retirement accounts and dental insurance and never worried about whether their car would start. Jake hesitated outside, suddenly aware of how wrong he looked. His shirt was clean but faded. His shoes were scuffed. His haircut was 3 months overdue. He was a man from another world, one of the invisible ones who cleaned their offices and served their food, and disappeared before they had to acknowledge his existence. But the email had said to arrive on time, and he was many things, but he wasn't late. He pushed through the door. The corner table was occupied by a woman who didn't look up when he entered. She was reading something on her phone, her face illuminated by the screen's glow, and Jake used the moment to study her. She was beautiful in a cold way, sharp cheekbones, dark hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail, a gray blazer exactly as described. Her posture suggested someone who had never slouched a day in her life, never second-guessed herself, never had to wonder if she deserved to be in the room. Jake approached the table and cleared his throat. She looked up. Her eyes were the color of whiskey, and they assessed him with the efficiency of a scanner at airport security, cataloging his flaws, calculating his worth, deciding whether he was worth her time. "Mr. Carter," she said. Not a question. "That's me." "Sit." He sat. A waiter appeared immediately. The woman clearly commanded that kind of attention, and Jake ordered black coffee because he couldn't afford anything else on the menu. The woman didn't order. She set down her phone and folded her hands on the table. "I'm Raina Vale," she said, CEO of Vale Technologies. "You've probably heard of us." Jake had. Everyone had. Vale Technologies was one of those companies that seemed to have its fingers in everything. Smartphones, cloud computing, artificial intelligence, the kind of innovations that regular people used without understanding who made them. And Raina Vale was the woman behind it all. A tech prodigy who'd built an empire from nothing and been on the cover of every business magazine in existence, which made this situation even more confusing. "I know who you are," Jake said carefully. "What I don't know is why you're interviewing strangers from Craigslist." Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or approval. "Direct? Good. I don't have time for small talk." "Neither do I." She leaned back slightly, studying him again. "Let me explain the situation. My parents are in town for the weekend. They've been pressuring me about my personal life since I turned 30, and that pressure has recently become unbearable. They want to know why I'm not married, why I don't have children, why I'm wasting my life on a company instead of giving them grandchildren. Her voice was flat, clinical, like she was describing someone else's problems. I've run out of excuses, so I've decided to give them what they want, or at least what they think they want. Jake's coffee arrived. He wrapped his hands around the cup, grateful for the warmth. You want to hire me to pretend to be your boyfriend? For one weekend, Friday evening through Sunday afternoon. You would accompany me to family meals, make pleasant conversation, and allow my parents to believe I'm in a stable, respectable relationship. Once they leave, we part ways. Simple. And the compensation? $10,000. Jake nearly choked on his coffee. $10,000. That was 3 months' rent. That was Maddie's medical bills. That was breathing room, actual, literal breathing room for the first time since Sarah died. Cash, Raina continued, watching his reaction. Half up front, half when the weekend concludes successfully. I'll also cover any wardrobe expenses. You'll need appropriate attire for the restaurants my parents prefer. The money sang in Jake's ears like a siren. He could picture it clearly, paying off the landlord, taking Maddie to a real doctor instead of the free clinic, maybe even buying her the toy she'd been eyeing at the store but was too considerate to ask for. But something didn't add up. Why me? He asked. You're a billionaire. You could hire an actor, someone professional. Why answer Craigslist applications? Raina's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes shifted. A flicker of vulnerability quickly suppressed. I tried the professional route. Actors are too polished, too aware of being watched. My parents are perceptive. They would see through it immediately. She paused. I need someone real. Someone who doesn't perform for a living but can be genuine in conversation. Someone who... She seemed to search for words. Someone who looks like they've actually lived. Jake understood what she wasn't saying. She needed someone weathered. Someone who wore their struggles on their face. Someone who looked like the kind of man a woman might actually fall for, rather than the kind of man who posed for stock photos. You're buying authenticity, he said. Yes. Jake leaned back in his chair, processing. The offer was absurd. The situation was ridiculous. He was being asked to lie to strangers for money, to play act at a relationship he didn't have, to pretend he was the kind of man who belonged in the world of billionaires and penthouse apartments. But he was also being offered a lifeline. I have conditions, he said. Raina's eyebrow arched. Conditions. 1. Whatever happens, I'm treated with respect. I'm not a prop you shove into a corner when you're done with me. If I'm playing your boyfriend, I'm playing your equal. Something like amusement crossed her face. Fair enough. What else? 2. This is strictly professional. No, he felt heat rise to his cheeks but pushed through. No physical expectations beyond what's necessary for the act. I'm not buying that kind of arrangement, Mr. Carter. I assure you, my interest in you is purely theatrical. Good. He took a breath. 3. I need half the money tonight. Not because I don't trust you. Actually, he didn't trust her at all. But because I have obligations that can't wait. Raina studied him for a long moment. Jake met her gaze, refusing to look away, refusing to be intimidated by someone who probably had more money in her checking account than he'd earn in a lifetime. Finally, she nodded. Acceptable, she said. I'll have a driver pick you up at your address Friday at 4 p.m. Bring nothing. I'll provide everything you need. She reached into her bag and produced an envelope, sliding it across the table. 5,000, the rest upon completion. Jake stared at the envelope. This was real. This was actually happening. He picked it up, felt the weight of the bills inside, and something in his chest loosened, the grip of panic that had been squeezing him for months, easing just slightly. One more thing, Raina said as he stood to leave. What's your story? I need details for our cover. Jake hesitated. How much truth should he share? How much did she actually need to know? I'm a widower, he said finally. My wife died 18 months ago. Cancer. Raina's expression didn't flicker, but her voice softened almost imperceptibly. I'm sorry. Don't be, just use whatever parts of my life work for your story. I'm not ashamed of who I am." He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "Mr. Carter," he looked back. "Friday, don't be late." He wasn't sure if it was a warning or a promise, but he nodded and walked out of the cafe with $5,000 in his pocket and the strange, unsettling feeling that he'd just stepped off a cliff. The money changed things immediately. Jake paid Mrs. Patterson, really paid her, not the IOUs and promises he'd been offering for months. He restocked the refrigerator with actual groceries. He took Maddie to the pediatrician and got the inhaler she needed for her cough, along with a lecture about mold exposure and keeping her room properly ventilated. But he didn't tell Maddie where the money came from. Not yet. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that Daddy is about to spend a weekend pretending to be someone's boyfriend for cash? Thursday night, Jake sat on Maddie's bed as she arranged her stuffed animals for the 100th time. Her favorite, a well-loved elephant named Mr. Trumpet, had the place of honor on her pillow. "Daddy," she said, not looking at him, "are you going somewhere?" Jake's heart clenched. "What makes you ask that, sweetheart?" "You're sad again, like when you went away before." He hadn't gone away, not really, but after Sarah's death, there had been days when he couldn't get out of bed, when Mrs. Patterson had kept Maddie for 24 hours at a stretch, while Jake lay in the dark and tried to remember why he should keep breathing. "I'm not going anywhere," he said softly, "but I do have something, a work thing this weekend. I'll be gone from Friday night to Sunday afternoon." Maddie's lower lip trembled. "Why?" "It's a special job. It pays really well, and when it's done, we'll have enough money for," he thought quickly, "for a trip to the zoo, just you and me, and maybe some ice cream after." Her eyes lit up. That pure, uncomplicated joy that children could access so easily and adults spent their whole lives trying to recapture. "Promise?" "Promise." She threw her arms around him, and Jake held her tight, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo and the particular warmth of her small body against his. This was why he was doing this, not for himself, for her. For the chance to give her something better than this cramped apartment and secondhand clothes and a father who was always exhausted and never quite enough. "I love you, Daddy," Maddie murmured into his shoulder. "I love you too, baby. More than anything in the world." Friday afternoon arrived with the inevitability of a doctor's diagnosis. Jake had spent the morning at his usual shift, then come home to shower and shave and stare at his reflection with mounting dread. What was he doing? He was a convenience store clerk with a dead wife and an empty bank account. He had no business pretending to be the boyfriend of a tech billionaire. Her parents would see through him in 5 minutes. The whole thing would collapse into humiliation, and he'd have to return the money he'd already spent. But when the black car pulled up at exactly 4 o'clock, Jake was waiting on the curb. The driver was a stoic man in a dark suit who didn't offer his name or any conversation. He opened the rear door and Jake climbed in, feeling the soft leather seats beneath him and the cool air conditioning against his face. The car was nicer than any place he'd lived. They drove through the city as afternoon light slanted gold between the buildings. Jake watched the neighborhoods change. From his worn-down corner of Brooklyn, across the bridge, into Manhattan, where the buildings grew taller and the people grew sleeker, and everything seemed to shimmer with money. The car pulled up to a glass tower that pierced the sky like a needle. "Penthouse level," the driver said. "Miss Vale is expecting you." Jake stepped out onto a sidewalk so clean it looked artificial. A doorman in a uniform that probably cost more than Jake's car held the entrance open, and Jake walked through a lobby of marble and modern art into an elevator that required a keycard. The doors closed. The elevator rose. And Jake Carter, widower and convenience store clerk and desperate father, wondered what the hell he'd gotten himself into. The penthouse door was already open when he stepped off the elevator. Beyond it lay a space that didn't look like any home Jake had ever seen. 2 stories of glass and steel and minimalist furniture, with windows that overlooked the entire city. The sunset painted the walls in shades of amber and rose, and for a moment, Jake just stood there, trying to comprehend that people actually lived like this. "You're on time." Raina's voice came from somewhere to his left. He turned to find her descending a floating staircase wearing a simple black dress that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her hair was down now, falling in dark waves past her shoulders, and she looked different somehow, softer, more human, though no less intimidating. "You told me not to be late," Jake said. "I did." She reached the bottom of the stairs and crossed to a bar cart, pouring 2 glasses of something amber. "Drink?" "What is it?" "Japanese whiskey, very old, very smooth." Jake accepted the glass but didn't drink. He was already off balance enough without adding alcohol to the mix. Raina sipped her own drink, studying him over the rim of the glass. "You clean up well." "Thanks, I found this shirt at Goodwill." Something flickered across her face, surprise maybe, or that strange almost amusement he'd seen at the cafe. "Your honesty is refreshing. Most people in my world are pathological liars." "Most people in your world can afford to be." She set down her glass. "Fair point. Come with me." She led him through the penthouse to a room that turned out to be a closet, though closet seemed like the wrong word for a space the size of Jake's entire apartment, filled with racks of clothing and organized shelves of shoes and what looked like a professional dressing mirror with lighting. "These are for you," Raina said, gesturing to one section of the racks. "I had my stylist select a range of sizes based on your application photo. We'll need to dress you appropriately for the meals." Jake touched the sleeve of a navy blazer that felt softer than anything he'd ever worn. The tag was in Italian. He didn't recognize the designer, but he recognized quality. "This is too much," he said. "It's necessary. My parents notice details. If you show up in a Goodwill shirt, they'll know something is wrong. They'll also know something is wrong when they find out you're dating a guy who works at a convenience store." Raina shook her head. "That's already been addressed. According to our cover story, you're a furniture designer, self-employed. You work with reclaimed materials and have a small but devoted clientele. It explains the—" She gestured vaguely at him. "Aesthetic." "The poor but artistic aesthetic?" "Exactly." Jake laughed despite himself. It was the first time he'd laughed in weeks, and the sound surprised him. "You've thought this through." "I think everything through. It's how I built a company." She pulled a shirt from the rack and held it up to his chest, checking the fit. "Blue works with your coloring. We'll start with this for dinner tonight." "Tonight?" "My parents arrived this afternoon. We're meeting them at 7. Jake's brief moment of amusement evaporated. "That's in 2 hours." "Which is why we need to work quickly. Go to the guest room at the end of the hall, shower, and change. I'll brief you on the essential details when you're done." She said it like it was simple. Like Jake wasn't about to walk into a dinner with a billionaire's parents and pretend to be someone he absolutely was not. He took the clothes she handed him and walked in the direction she pointed. The guest room was larger than his apartment. The bathroom had a shower with more settings than Jake knew what to do with. He stood under water that was the perfect temperature and tried to organize his thoughts. Facts. He was about to lie to strangers for money. He was wearing clothes that cost more than he made in a month. He was in a penthouse with a beautiful billionaire who looked at him like he was a puzzle she was trying to solve. Questions. Why was she really doing this? What happened to make her so desperate that she turned to Craigslist? What was she hiding behind those whiskey-colored eyes? He turned off the water and reached for a towel that was softer than his bedsheets. None of the questions mattered. He was here for Maddie, for the money, for the chance to stop drowning, even if just for a moment. An hour later, Jake stood in front of the mirror in the penthouse's main room, wearing a navy blazer, a pale blue shirt, and gray trousers that fit better than anything he'd ever owned. He looked like someone else, someone who belonged in this world of glass towers and whiskey bars. "Better," Raina said, appearing beside him in the reflection. She'd changed into a deep green dress and added subtle jewelry, pearl earrings, a thin gold bracelet. "You look almost respectable." "Thanks, I think." She handed him a small folder. Background information. My parents' names, their interests, topics to avoid. Memorize what you can in the car. Jake flipped through the pages. Raina's father was a retired professor of economics. Her mother was a former concert pianist. They lived in Seattle and had been married for 40 years. They liked classical music, fine wine, and asking their daughter why she was still single. "What's the topic to avoid?" he asked. Raina's expression flickered. That brief vulnerability he'd glimpsed before, quickly masked. "Just read the file." He found it on the last page. "Do not mention Daniel. Do not discuss 2019. Redirect if necessary." Who's Daniel? No one you need to worry about. Her voice was sharp now, a wall going up. Are you ready? Jake closed the folder. Ready as I'll ever be. Good. Remember, you're my boyfriend of 4 months. We met at a gallery opening. You're devoted, attentive, and completely smitten. Think you can manage that? Jake looked at her, this woman who had everything the world could offer and was still so alone that she had to buy companionship. And somewhere beneath the intimidation and the strangeness, he felt something unexpected. Understanding. Yeah, he said. I can manage that. The elevator carried them down into the unknown. The restaurant was the kind of place Jake had only seen in movies, hushed and elegant, with white tablecloths and candles and waiters who moved like ghosts. Raina's parents were already seated when they arrived, and Jake's first impression was of warmth that seemed at odds with the cold perfection of their daughter. Eleanor Vale rose from her chair, a slender woman with silver hair and Raina's cheekbones. Her smile was genuine as she embraced her daughter, though her eyes traveled immediately to Jake. So this is the mystery man, she said. We were beginning to think Raina had invented you. Mom, Raina said, a note of warning in her voice. But Eleanor had already turned to Jake, extending her hand. I'm Eleanor, and you must be Jake. Raina has told us almost nothing about you. She's very private, Jake said, shaking the offered hand. I've learned not to take it personally. Eleanor laughed, a genuine surprise sound. Oh, I like him already. Richard Vale stood to shake Jake's hand as well. He was tall and lean, with glasses and the slightly rumpled look of an academic who never quite adapted to civilian life. His grip was firm, his gaze assessing. Furniture design, he said. Interesting field. Lots of competition from mass production. That's true, Jake replied, drawing on half-remembered conversations from a woodworking class he'd taken years ago. But there's still a market for handcrafted work. People want to own something unique, something with a story. Richard nodded slowly. I suppose there's something to that, quality over quantity. They sat, and wine was poured, and the elaborate dance of the dinner began. Jake had expected the conversation to be an interrogation, questions designed to trip him up, to expose the lie at the heart of their arrangement. But instead, Raina's parents seemed genuinely interested in getting to know him. Eleanor asked about his work, his background, his life before Raina. Richard discussed economics and craftsmanship, and the state of the American middle class with an earnestness that felt almost naive. Jake answered carefully, sticking close to the truth wherever possible. He was from the Midwest. He'd moved to New York for opportunity. He worked with his hands. He found satisfaction in creating things that lasted. He didn't mention Sarah. He didn't mention Maddie. Those truths were too precious to be part of the act. What surprised him most was Raina. Away from the sterile perfection of her penthouse, in the presence of people who knew her, she was different, softer, more uncertain. She laughed at her father's corny jokes and let her mother fuss over her, and occasionally glanced at Jake, but with something that looked almost like gratitude. And when her mother asked how they'd met, Raina's hand found Jake's under the table. It was at the Morrison Gallery opening, Raina said, her voice smooth. I was there for a client event, and Jake was examining a sculpture in the corner. He was so focused, he didn't even notice me approach. What happened then? Eleanor asked, her eyes bright. She told me I was standing in her way, Jake improvised, surprising himself. Very politely, but definitely a command. Richard chuckled. That sounds like our daughter. I moved, Jake continued, and then we started talking about the piece. It was abstract. I didn't really understand it, but Raina did. She explained what the artist was trying to say, and He looked at her, playing the part but feeling something strange flutter in his chest. I just wanted to keep listening to her. Raina's fingers tightened around his. Her expression was controlled, but her eyes held something. Surprise, maybe. Or recognition. He asked me for coffee, she said quietly, right there in the gallery. No games, no pretense. Just, would you like to get coffee with me? And you said yes? Eleanor looked delighted. I said maybe. A small smile crossed Raina's face. I made him work for it. The story wasn't true. None of it was true. But sitting there, with Raina's hand in his and her parents' faces glowing with approval, Jake felt the lie settle around them like a comfortable blanket. It was disturbingly easy to pretend. Dinner stretched on. More wine, more stories. Jake learned that Raina had been a serious child, always reading, always thinking. He learned that her parents had supported her through the chaos of building a company, even when they didn't understand what she was building. He learned that they worried about her, genuinely, deeply worried, and that worry manifested as pressure because they didn't know how else to show their love. And he learned that they had lost someone too. It came up accidentally. Eleanor mentioned a vacation they'd taken before everything happened, and a shadow crossed the table. Richard's hand found his wife's. Raina's grip on Jake's fingers tightened almost painfully, but no one explained, and Jake didn't ask. By the time dessert arrived, Jake felt like he'd run a marathon. The constant performance, the careful navigation of half-truths and misdirections, the strange intimacy of pretending to love someone he barely knew, all of it was exhausting in a way that physical labor never was. But it was also, unexpectedly, something else, something like connection. When they finally said goodnight in the restaurant's foyer, Eleanor hugged Jake like he was already part of the family. "Take care of her," she whispered in his ear. "She needs someone who sees her, really sees her." Jake didn't know what to say. He just nodded. The car ride back to the penthouse was quiet. Raina stared out the window at the passing city lights, her expression unreadable. "You did well," she finally said. "Better than I expected." "Your parents are nice." It wasn't hard to be nice back. They are nice. They're also relentless. They'll have follow-up questions at lunch tomorrow, stories they want to hear, details they want to verify. Jake leaned back against the leather seat. "Then we'll give them details. We'll make it believable." Raina turned to look at him. In the shifting light, her face was softer than he'd seen it, younger, almost vulnerable. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "And don't say the money. You could have walked away at any point. You stayed. Why?" Jake thought about the question. He thought about Maddie, about Sarah, about the crushing weight of grief and debt, and the desperate need to provide for the only family he had left. But there was something else, something he hadn't expected. "Because you needed help," he said simply. "And I know what it's like to need help and not know how to ask for it." Raina was silent for a long moment. "You're not what I expected," she said finally. "What did you expect?" "I don't know, someone more mercenary. Someone who would treat this like the transaction it is." "It is a transaction, but that doesn't mean I can't care about doing it right." The car pulled up to the tower. The driver opened the door. But before Jake could exit, Raina's hand caught his arm. "The guest room is prepared for you," she said. "We'll have breakfast at 8, then lunch with my parents at noon. Get some sleep." "What about you?" "I don't sleep much." She looked away. "I haven't, for a while." Jake understood that too. The nights after Sarah died had been endless, hours of staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence, feeling the absence of her breathing beside him. "If you need company," he said carefully, "I'm not going anywhere." Something flickered in her eyes. Not attraction, not exactly, but something closer to surprise. Like she wasn't used to being offered comfort without conditions. "Good night, Jake," she said. "Good night, Raina." He walked into the penthouse, found the guest room, and lay down on a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud. But sleep didn't come easily. His mind kept circling back to her, to the woman who had everything except the one thing that mattered, to the shadow that crossed her face when her parents mentioned the past, to the way her hand had fit in his, warm and uncertain and real. This was supposed to be an act, but as Jake finally drifted off, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, that the performance was becoming something else, something dangerous. He woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the smell of fresh coffee. For a moment, Jake didn't know where he was. The room was too big, the bed too soft, the silence too complete. Then memory returned in a rush. The dinner, the parents, Raina's hand in his, and he sat up, heart racing. His phone showed 7:23 a.m. Several messages from Mrs. Patterson, all reassuring. Maddie had slept through the night. Maddie had eaten a good breakfast. Maddie missed her daddy, but was being very brave. Jake typed back a quick thank you and scrolled to the photos Mrs. Patterson had sent. Maddie grinning over a bowl of cereal, Maddie with Mr. Trumpet, Maddie making a silly face at the camera. His chest ached. He should be there. He should be making her breakfast, walking her to the park, watching cartoons on the worn couch while she snuggled against his side. Instead, he was in a billionaire's guest room, preparing for another day of pretending to be someone he wasn't. But the money would make everything better. He showered, dressed in the clothes that had been laid out, another expensive combination that felt like wearing someone else's skin, and made his way to the main room. Raina was already there, seated at a massive dining table with her laptop open and a cup of coffee at her elbow. She wore casual clothes this morning, a cashmere sweater, fitted jeans, but still managed to look like she belonged in a magazine. "There's coffee on the counter," she said without looking up. "And breakfast if you're hungry. Maria made eggs." Jake poured himself a cup and took a plate from the spread on the counter. Eggs, fresh fruit, pastries that looked too perfect to eat. "Who's Maria?" he asked, sitting across from her. "My housekeeper. She comes in the mornings. You won't see her. She's very discreet." Of course she had a housekeeper. She probably had an entire staff Jake hadn't met yet. "What are you working on?" Raina finally looked up. "Quarterly projections, a board presentation, the usual chaos." "You're working on a Saturday? I work every day. That's how companies grow." Jake ate his eggs and watched her. Even now, with no audience to perform for, she held herself with rigid control, spine straight, movements precise, expression carefully neutral. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You can ask. I might not answer." "Last night, your parents mentioned something that happened, something bad. They didn't say what, and you didn't explain." He set down his fork. "Is that connected to whoever Daniel is?" Raina's fingers froze on the keyboard. For a long moment, she didn't move. "You read the file," she said flatly. "I read what you gave me. That's my job, right? To be prepared?" "Some information isn't relevant to the job." "Then why did you include it?" She closed the laptop with a sharp click. "Daniel was my fiancé. 3 years ago we were engaged. We were supposed to get married in the fall." Her voice was clinical, like she was reciting statistics. "He died in a car accident 6 months before the wedding. I was driving." Jake's breath caught. "Raina, don't." She held up a hand. "Don't say you're sorry. Don't say it wasn't my fault. Don't say any of the things people say when they're trying to make themselves feel better about someone else's tragedy." "I wasn't going to." She looked at him sharply. "What were you going to say?" Jake thought about Sarah, about the hospital room, about the horrible, suffocating guilt of being the one who survived. "I was going to say I understand," he said quietly. "My wife died 18 months ago. Cancer. I was there for all of it, the treatments, the hospital stays, the end. And I still blame myself, every single day." "Why would you blame yourself for cancer?" "Because I couldn't fix it, because I couldn't save her, because I'm still here and she's not, and our daughter asks why mommy had to go away, and I don't have an answer." The silence stretched between them. Raina's expression had shifted, the mask cracking, something raw and painful showing through. "You have a daughter," she said. Jake nodded. "Maddie. She's 6. "You didn't mention that in your application. I didn't think it was relevant. She's staying with a neighbor this weekend. She doesn't know anything about—" He gestured vaguely. "This." Raina stood abruptly and walked to the windows. The morning light caught her profile, and Jake saw something he hadn't noticed before. Lines of exhaustion around her eyes, a tension in her shoulders that never quite relaxed. "My parents want grandchildren," she said to the glass. "That's the real reason for their pressure. Daniel and I were going to give them that. Now Daniel is gone and I spend 20 hours a day building a company, and they can't understand why I won't just—" She made a frustrated gesture. "Find someone. Start over. Move on." "Maybe they just want you to be happy." "They want me to be what I was before, and that person is gone. She died in that car with Daniel." Jake rose from the table and crossed to stand beside her. He didn't touch her. That felt like crossing a line they hadn't negotiated, but he stood close enough that she could feel his presence. "The person you were before isn't gone," he said. "She's just buried, under grief and guilt and all the armor you've built to survive." Raina turned to look at him. Her eyes were bright, and he realized with a shock that she was fighting back tears. "You don't know me," she said. "No, but I know what it's like to bury yourself. And I know it doesn't work forever." For a moment, something passed between them. Recognition, understanding, the dangerous intimacy of shared pain. Then Raina's phone buzzed on the table, shattering the moment. She crossed to answer it, and her voice was instantly professional again. The CEO, not the grieving woman. Jake turned back to his breakfast, but the food had lost its appeal. He was in trouble. He'd taken this job for money, for Maddie, for survival. He'd told himself it was just acting, a role to play, a transaction to complete. But somewhere between the dinner and the confession, and the morning light on Raina's tear-bright eyes, something had shifted. And Jake had no idea how to shift it back. Lunch with Raina's parents was at an upscale Italian restaurant in Tribeca. The conversation was lighter than dinner, more reminiscence, less interrogation, and Jake found himself relaxing into the role more easily than he'd expected. He told stories from his childhood, carefully edited to remove identifying details. He asked Eleanor about her piano career and was treated to a fascinating monologue about Chopin and performance anxiety and the particular terror of Carnegie Hall. He discussed economics with Richard, nodding along even when the technical jargon went over his head. And through it all, Raina sat beside him, playing her part with practiced ease. Their hands found each other under the table. Their shoulders brushed when they leaned close. When Jake made a joke that landed, Raina's laugh was genuine, surprised out of her, like she'd forgotten she could make that sound. "You two are lovely together," Eleanor said as dessert arrived. "I can see how happy she is." "Mom," Raina murmured, "I'm just saying what I see, darling. You've been so closed off for so long. It's nice to see you opening up again." Jake caught Raina's eye. She looked uncomfortable, but also something else, something almost wistful. "Jake is easy to talk to," she said finally. "He doesn't expect me to be anything other than what I am." "That's rare," Richard observed. "Most people want something from you." "Most people do," Jake agreed. "But I've learned that the best relationships are the ones where you can just be. No performance, no expectations, just two people figuring it out together." Eleanor beamed. Richard looked thoughtful. And Raina squeezed Jake's hand under the table, hard like she was holding on for dear life. The bill came. Richard insisted on paying. Eleanor hugged them both goodbye and made them promise to have dinner again tomorrow. And then it was just the two of them in the back seat of the car, driving through the city as the afternoon shadows lengthened. "You're good at this," Raina said after a long silence. "Almost too good." "It's not hard to play a good guy when the people I'm playing for are decent." "But it is playing." She turned to look at him. "Right?" Jake thought about the question, thought about the warmth in his chest when she laughed, thought about the way his heart had stuttered when she almost cried, thought about the strange electric current that hummed between them whenever their eyes met. "Right," he said, but even he could hear the hesitation in his voice. The car pulled up to the tower. Jake's phone buzzed. Another update from Mrs. Patterson. Maddie was watching a movie. Maddie missed him. Maddie wanted to know when Daddy was coming home. Jake typed back a quick reply, promising to call before bedtime. "You should go," Raina said, watching him. "What?" "Go home. See your daughter. This was supposed to be about pretending, not about—" She broke off, looking away. "You've done what I asked. You can leave if you want." Jake studied her profile. The sharp lines, the controlled expression, the loneliness she wore like a second skin. "Do you want me to leave?" The question hung between them. "What I want is irrelevant," she said. "This is a business arrangement." "That's not what I asked." Raina finally turned to face him. In the afternoon light, her eyes were almost gold, and Jake saw something in them that made his chest ache. She wanted him to stay. She wouldn't say it, might not even admit it to herself, but she wanted him to stay. "One more dinner," Jake said. "Tomorrow. We'll finish what we started, and your parents will go home happy. Then we'll figure out the rest." "The rest?" "I don't know yet, but I have a feeling this isn't as simple as either of us thought it would be." Raina opened her mouth to argue, to deflect, to retreat behind her walls. But something in his expression must have stopped her. "One more dinner," she agreed. They got out of the car. They rode the elevator in silence. And when they reached the penthouse, Raina excused herself to make phone calls while Jake stood at the windows, watching the sun sink behind the skyline. He thought about Sarah, about Maddie, about the money that had seemed so important 48 hours ago and now felt like the least significant part of this entire arrangement. He thought about Raina, brilliant and broken and desperately lonely. And he thought about himself, a man who had sworn he'd never feel anything again, now feeling far too much. Tomorrow, the weekend would end. Jake would go home to his apartment and his daughter and his barely surviving life. Raina would go back to her company and her walls and her endless empty penthouse. Everything would return to normal. But standing there in the fading light, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that normal was no longer possible. That something had changed between them, something neither of them had expected or asked for. Something that might just change everything. The morning light found Jake standing in the same spot by the windows, though hours had passed and the sun now rose from the opposite horizon. He hadn't slept well. Fragments of dreams about Sarah mixing with Raina's whiskey-colored eyes, guilt and longing tangled together until he couldn't separate one from the other. His phone showed 6:47 a.m. and a new message from Mrs. Patterson. Maddie had a good night, asking when you're coming home. Call when you can. Jake typed back a quick response, promising to call within the hour, then made his way to the kitchen. The penthouse was silent, and he assumed Raina was still asleep until he rounded the corner and found her already there, standing at the counter with a coffee cup cradled in both hands, staring at nothing. She was wearing a silk robe over what looked like pajamas, her hair loose and slightly tangled, and without her armor of designer clothes and perfect posture, she looked younger, more human, more like someone who carried the same weight Jake did. "You're up early," she said without turning around. "I could say the same about you." "I told you. I don't sleep much." She finally looked at him, and he saw the shadows under her eyes, the slight redness that suggested she'd been crying or hadn't slept at all or both. "There's coffee in the pot." Jake poured himself a cup and leaned against the counter across from her. The silence between them felt different than it had yesterday, heavier, more charged, like the air before a storm. "I need to call my daughter," he said, "before she leaves for the park with Mrs. Patterson." "Of course." Raina set down her cup. "Use the study if you want privacy. Down the hall, second door on the left." Jake found the study, another impossibly elegant room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a desk that probably cost more than his car. He sat in a leather chair that swallowed him whole and dialed Mrs. Patterson's number. Maddie's voice came through after 3 rings, bright and eager. "Daddy! Hey, sweetheart, I heard you've been having fun with Mrs. Patterson. We made cookies yesterday and watched 2 movies, and she let me stay up late." Jake smiled despite the ache in his chest. "That sounds amazing. Are you being good?" "I'm always good, Daddy." A pause, and when she spoke again, her voice was smaller. "When are you coming home?" "Tomorrow, baby. I'll be home tomorrow afternoon, and then we're going to the zoo, remember?" "I remember." Another pause. "Daddy, I miss you." "I miss you too, sweetheart, more than anything." "Is your work thing almost done?" Jake closed his eyes. "Almost, just 1 more day." "Okay." He could hear her trying to be the big girl she thought he needed her to be. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, Maddie. So much. Be good for Mrs. Patterson, okay? I'll call again tonight." He hung up and sat in the silence for a long moment, Maddie's voice echoing in his ears. This was why he was here. This was the only reason any of this made sense. The money that would keep her safe, keep her healthy, keep the crushing weight of poverty from stealing her childhood the way it had stolen so much of his. But somewhere along the way, something else had crept in, something that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with the woman in the kitchen. Jake stood, squared his shoulders, and walked back to face whatever this day would bring. Raina was no longer in the kitchen when he returned. He found her in the main room, still in her robe but with her laptop open, already working despite the early hour. "Your daughter sounds sweet," she said without looking up. "She is. She's the best thing that ever happened to me." "How do you do it?" Now she did look up, and her expression held genuine curiosity. Being a single parent while working nights at a convenience store while barely keeping your head above water. How do you keep going? Jake thought about the question. He'd asked himself the same thing countless times, usually at 3 in the morning when the exhaustion was so heavy he could barely breathe. "I don't have a choice," he said finally. "She needs me. So I keep going." Everyone has a choice. People give up all the time. Not people with kids, or at least not the ones who deserve to have kids. He sat on the couch across from her. "When Sarah died, there were days I wanted to give up. Days I couldn't see any point in getting out of bed. But Maddie would crawl into bed with me, and she'd put her little hand on my face, and she'd say, 'It's okay, Daddy, I'm here.' And I realized that she was keeping me alive just as much as I was keeping her alive." Raina closed her laptop slowly. "That's a beautiful thing. It's a terrifying thing, loving someone that much, knowing that if anything happened to her, I wouldn't survive it. But you do it anyway. What's the alternative? Living without love?" Jake shook his head. "That's not living. That's just existing." Raina was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes existing is all you can manage. Jake understood what she wasn't saying, that she'd been existing for 3 years since Daniel died, that she'd built walls so high and thick that nothing could get through, not her parents' love, not her own loneliness, not the desperate need for connection that everyone carried. "You don't have to do that forever," he said softly. "Don't I?" She met his eyes, and he saw something raw there, something unguarded. What's the point of opening yourself up again? Of letting someone in? People leave, people die, and you're left with a hole in your chest that never heals. The hole doesn't heal, but it does change. It becomes part of you instead of something that's destroying you. How long did that take? "I don't know. I'm not sure I'm there yet." Jake leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "But I know that closing yourself off doesn't protect you. It just means you're alone with the pain." Raina looked away toward the windows and the city sprawling below. "I don't know how to be any other way. You were someone else last night, at dinner, when you were laughing at your dad's jokes and letting your mom fuss over you. That was real. That was performance." "Was it? All of it?" She didn't answer, but the silence spoke volumes. Jake's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. He glanced at it, expecting spam, but what he saw made his blood freeze. "What is it?" Raina asked, noticing his expression. He showed her the screen. The message was simple. "She's cute. Be careful." Attached was a photo of Maddie, walking into Mrs. Patterson's building yesterday afternoon. Jake was on his feet before he finished processing. His heart slammed against his ribs, his vision tunneling to that single image, his daughter, his baby girl, captured in a photo by someone watching her. Where did this come from? Raina stood too, her face pale. "Who sent this?" "I don't know." Jake's hands were shaking. I have to go. I have to get to her." "Wait." Raina grabbed his arm. "If someone is watching her, you can't just run over there. You might lead them right to her." "She's my daughter." I know. Her grip tightened. "But panicking won't help her. Let me call my security team. They can have someone at that building in 10 minutes, discreetly, without drawing attention." Jake wanted to argue, wanted to bolt out the door and race across the city, but some rational part of his brain recognized that she was right. Whoever had sent that photo was trying to scare him. If he reacted blindly, he might make things worse. "Okay," he said, his voice rough. "Okay, make the call." Raina was already reaching for her phone. She spoke in rapid, clipped sentences, an address, a description of the building, instructions to be invisible but thorough. Within 3 minutes, she'd dispatched a team. "They'll be there in 12 minutes, she said, hanging up. "They'll watch the building, check for anyone suspicious, and report back. Your daughter won't even know they're there." Jake paced the room, unable to stand still. "Who would do this? I don't have enemies. I work at a convenience store. I don't have anything anyone would want." Raina's expression had shifted, something calculated entering her eyes. "But I do." Jake stopped pacing. "What?" "Think about it. You answered an anonymous ad. You're spending the weekend in my penthouse. You've been seen with me publicly, by my parents and probably by people at the restaurants." She sat down heavily on the couch. "This isn't about you, Jake. Someone is using you to get to me." The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He'd walked into something much bigger than a fake relationship for cash. He'd walked into a world of corporate enemies and power plays and people who use children as leverage. "This has to end," he said. "Whatever this is, it has to end. I'm taking my daughter and disappearing." "And going where? With what money?" Raina's voice was sharp but not unkind. "Whoever sent that photo knows where she is. If you grab her and run, they'll follow, and you'll be alone, without resources, without protection." "What's the alternative? Stay here and wait for them to hurt her?" "The alternative is letting me help you." She stood, facing him directly. "I have resources, security, lawyers. I can protect her, protect both of you, while we figure out who's behind this and why." Jake stared at her. 24 hours ago, she'd been a stranger offering him money for a weekend of pretending. Now she was offering to pull him and his daughter into her world, her protection, her life. "Why would you do that?" Raina held his gaze. "Because it's my fault you're in this situation, and because—" She hesitated, something vulnerable flickering across her face. "Because I don't want anything to happen to that little girl. Or to you." The moment stretched between them, charged with fear and something else, something neither of them was ready to name. Jake's phone buzzed again. Another text from the same unknown number. "Back off the Nexus deal, or the kid pays." He showed Raina, and her face went white. "Nexus," she whispered. That's one of my biggest acquisitions. We're closing next week. It's worth $800 million. Who would want to stop it? Half a dozen competitors. But this level of threat using a child—" Her jaw tightened. "There's only one person who would go this far." "Who?" "Victor Westridge, CEO of Westridge Technologies. We've been rivals for 15 years. He's ruthless, vicious, and he's been trying to destroy my company since the day I started it." She began pacing now, her mind visibly working. "Nexus is a cloud security firm. Whoever controls it controls the infrastructure for half the Fortune 500. Victor wanted it. I outbid him. And now he's trying to force me out by threatening my daughter." "Yes." She stopped pacing and met his eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never thought you couldn't have known. I should have been more careful. Posting that ad, meeting a stranger, bringing someone into my life without thinking about the consequences." Her voice cracked. "I put your family in danger because I was lonely and desperate and too proud to ask for help any other way." Jake crossed the distance between them. His hand found her arm, steadying her. "We can deal with blame later," he said. "Right now I need to know my daughter is safe." Raina nodded, visibly composing herself. "My team should be in position by now. Let me check." She made another call, speaking in low tones, asking questions and giving instructions. Jake watched her transform, from the vulnerable woman who'd admitted her loneliness to the CEO who commanded an empire. It was like watching two different people occupy the same body. "They're there," she said, hanging up. "No suspicious activity. They'll stay on watch until we figure out our next move." "What is our next move?" Raina's expression hardened. "We bring your daughter here. We put her under my protection, and then we deal with Victor." Jake's instinct was to resist, to grab Maddie and disappear, to trust no one and nothing. But he'd spent 18 months learning that he couldn't do everything alone. Sarah's illness had taught him that. Her death had hammered it home. Sometimes you had to trust someone. Sometimes you had to let someone help. "Okay," he said finally, "but she doesn't know about any of this. The fake relationship, the money, the arrangement. She can't know. She won't. As far as she's concerned, you've met someone special and you're introducing her." Raina's mouth quirked slightly. "It won't even be entirely a lie." Jake didn't know how to respond to that. He wasn't sure what was real anymore. What was performance and what was genuine, where the act ended and something else began. But there wasn't time to figure it out. His daughter was in danger, and that trumped everything else. "I'll call Mrs. Patterson," he said. "Tell her I'm picking up Maddie early. I'll arrange transport, armored car, discreet route. If anyone is watching, they won't be able to follow." Jake nodded and reached for his phone. As he dialed, Raina's hand caught his. A brief touch, warm and steadying. "We'll keep her safe," she said. "I promise." It was a promise she had no way of guaranteeing, but in that moment, Jake believed her. He believed her completely. Mrs. Patterson didn't ask questions when Jake called to say he was picking up Maddie earlier than planned. She was the kind of woman who had learned to read between the lines, and whatever she heard in Jake's voice told her this wasn't a moment for small talk. An hour later, Jake stood in the lobby of a gleaming office building 3 blocks from Mrs. Patterson's apartment, a neutral location Raina's security team had selected for the transfer. He watched through tinted windows as an armored SUV pulled up and Mrs. Patterson emerged with Maddie's hand clutched in hers. His daughter looked confused, but not scared. Mrs. Patterson had clearly been her usual calm, reassuring self, and when she saw Jake through the glass doors, her whole face lit up. "Daddy!" She broke free from Mrs. Patterson and ran to him, and Jake scooped her up in his arms, holding her so tight she squeaked in protest. "You're squishing me." "Sorry, baby. I just missed you." He set her down but kept his hand on her shoulder, unwilling to let go completely. "Did you have fun with Mrs. Patterson?" "So much fun. We made cookies and watched movies, and she taught me how to play checkers." Maddie's excitement dimmed slightly. "But I missed you. You were gone forever." "I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry." He knelt to her level, brushing hair from her face. "Hey, I have a surprise for you." "A surprise?" Her eyes went wide. "What is it?" "We're going to stay somewhere special tonight, a really fancy place with big windows and a TV the size of a wall." "Bigger than Mrs. Patterson's?" "Way bigger." Maddie processed this information with the seriousness of a 6-year-old evaluating life's great mysteries. "Can Mr. Trumpet come?" Jake looked at Mrs. Patterson, who was already retrieving the stuffed elephant from Maddie's overnight bag. "Mr. Trumpet can definitely come," he said. The ride to the penthouse was an exercise in distraction. Jake pointed out landmarks through the tinted windows, answered Maddie's endless questions about where they were going and why, and tried not to let his fear show. She was perceptive, too perceptive for her age, and if she sensed something was wrong, it would only scare her. When the elevator opened into Raina's penthouse, Maddie's jaw dropped. "Daddy," she whispered, "are we in a castle?" "Not quite, sweetheart, but it's pretty cool, right?" "So cool." She stepped out of the elevator, turning in slow circles to take everything in. "There's so much sky." She was right. The floor-to-ceiling windows made the sky feel close enough to touch, clouds drifting past like visitors, the city sprawling endlessly below. And standing by those windows, watching them with an expression Jake couldn't quite read, was Raina. She'd changed while he was gone, put on simple jeans and a soft sweater, pulled her hair back in a ponytail. She looked less like a CEO and more like a person, which Jake suspected was deliberate. "Hi there," Raina said, her voice warm but uncertain. "You must be Maddie." Maddie pressed against Jake's leg, suddenly shy. "Hi. I've heard a lot about you. Your dad says you're the bravest person he knows." Maddie looked up at Jake. "You said that?" "I did, because it's true." This seemed to satisfy something in Maddie. She released Jake's leg and took a tentative step toward Raina. "Are you Daddy's friend?" Raina glanced at Jake, a question in her eyes. He nodded slightly. "Yes," she said. "I'm your daddy's friend. My name is Raina." "That's a pretty name." Maddie clutched Mr. Trumpet to her chest. "Do you live here?" "I do." "All by yourself?" Something flickered across Raina's face. Pain, quickly masked. "Yes, all by myself." Maddie considered this with the gravity of a judge weighing evidence. That sounds lonely. Out of the mouths of babes, Jake thought. Trust a 6-year-old to cut straight to the heart of things. "It can be," Raina admitted. "That's why I'm glad you're here. It's nice to have company." Maddie seemed to accept this. She turned in another slow circle, taking in the penthouse's impossibly luxurious details. "Can I watch the big TV?" Jake laughed despite everything. "Maybe later. First, let's get settled in." He got Maddie situated in the guest room he'd been using. She was delighted by the bed that swallowed her whole and the bathroom with more buttons than a spaceship, while Raina excused herself to make more calls. By the time Jake emerged, Maddie was already half asleep, the stress of the morning finally catching up with her. He tucked Mr. Trumpet under her arm and kissed her forehead. "Sleep well, sweetheart. Daddy's right outside." She murmured something unintelligible and burrowed deeper into the blankets. Jake found Raina in her home office, a sleek space with multiple monitors and a view that probably cost more than his apartment building. "Any updates?" he asked from the doorway. "My security team is analyzing the photo. They think it was taken from a parked car, but they haven't identified which one yet." She turned to face him. "I've also contacted my legal team. If we can trace this back to Westridge, we can take action." "Legal action? Someone threatened my daughter." "Criminal action too, but I need proof before I can go to the police. Right now, all I have is a blocked number and an anonymous photo." Jake entered the office, frustration boiling in his chest. "So we just wait? While he's out there watching?" "No, we prepare." Raina pulled up something on her computer. "I've moved up the Nexus closing. If we can complete the acquisition before Westridge can interfere, he loses his leverage." "What if he escalates before then?" "Then we'll be ready." She met his eyes. "I've increased security at this building. No one gets in without clearance, and I've hired a private investigator, someone who specializes in corporate espionage. If Westridge is behind this, we'll find the proof." Jake wanted to argue, to demand more immediate action, but he recognized the logic in her approach. Charging at Westridge without evidence would only tip him off. Better to build a case and strike decisively. "What about my parents?" Raina added. "Dinner tonight. I should cancel." "No." Jake surprised himself with the vehemence of the word. "If you cancel, Westridge wins. He knows he's gotten to you. But Maddie will be here, protected by your security team, and your parents meeting her might actually help our cover. If Westridge thinks this is all some elaborate act, seeing us with a child might convince him otherwise." Raina's eyebrows rose. "You want to use your daughter as part of the performance?" "I want Westridge to think this is real, that we're real." He paused, considering the weight of what he was saying. "Because maybe we are. I don't know anymore." The admission hung between them, dangerous and honest and terrifying. Raina was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know either," she said finally. "But I know that I don't want anything to happen to that little girl. Not because of me, not because of my company or my enemies or any of it. Then we keep her safe. Together." "Together," Raina repeated, like she was testing the word, seeing how it felt. It felt right. Wrong and complicated and impossible, but right. Jake's phone buzzed. For a horrible moment, he thought it was another threatening message, but it was just a calendar reminder he'd forgotten to delete. A parent-teacher conference he'd missed last week. A reminder of his real life, the life waiting for him outside these glass walls. "I should check on Maddie," he said. "Make sure she's actually sleeping." Raina nodded. "I'll finalize the arrangements for tonight. Dinner at 7, the same restaurant. My parents will be thrilled to meet her." Jake paused at the door. "Raina?" "Yes?" "Thank you for all of this. You didn't have to help us." "Yes, I did." Her voice was quiet but certain. "Maybe it took something terrible to make me realize it, but I did." Jake left before he could say something he wasn't ready to mean. Maddie woke up hungry and full of energy, the morning's stress forgotten in the way only children could manage. Jake made her a sandwich from the penthouse's well-stocked kitchen. Raina's housekeeper had somehow anticipated the need for peanut butter and jelly and watched her eat while processing everything that had happened. His life had changed irrevocably in the span of 48 hours. He'd walked into this arrangement expecting a simple transaction, money for pretending, and instead found himself tangled in corporate warfare, genuine connection, and a threat to the person he loved most in the world. "Daddy?" Maddie's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Why are you making the worried face?" He smoothed his expression. "What worried face?" "The one you make when you're scared but don't want me to know." She took another bite of her sandwich. "Mommy used to make that face too, in the hospital." Jake's heart cracked open a little more. "You're too smart for your own good, you know that?" "Mrs. Patterson says I'm precocious." "She's right." He sat down across from her. "I'm a little worried about some grown-up stuff. But nothing for you to be scared about, okay? I've got it handled." Maddie studied him with those two serious eyes. "Is it about Raina?" "Sort of. Why?" "She seems sad, like she needs a friend." Jake didn't know how to respond. His 6-year-old had seen in minutes what he'd taken hours to notice. "Maybe she does," he said finally. "Maybe we can be her friends." Maddie finished her sandwich and wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "I like her. She talked to me like a real person, not like a baby." "You are a real person, sweetheart." "I know, but some grown-ups forget that." Raina appeared in the doorway, and Jake wondered how long she'd been listening. "Maddie," she said, "would you like to see something cool?" Maddie's eyes lit up. "What kind of something?" "My company has a floor in this building. There's a room with robots that draw pictures." Maddie was off her chair before Raina finished speaking. "Robots? Real robots?" Raina smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her face. "Real robots. Well, robotic arms. They're programmed to create art based on voice commands. Can I tell them what to draw?" "That's exactly what they're for." Jake watched his daughter take Raina's hand with the easy trust of childhood, chattering excitedly about the robots and what she would make them draw. Raina looked down at the small hand in hers with an expression Jake couldn't quite name. Wonder, maybe, or the specific ache of holding something precious. "I'll meet you up there," he said. "I want to make a few calls." Raina nodded, but her attention was already on Maddie, answering questions about whether robots dreamed and if they had names, and could she keep one of the drawings. Jake watched them disappear into the elevator, his daughter's laughter echoing off the marble walls. He was falling. He could feel it, the terrifying, exhilarating plunge into something he hadn't asked for and couldn't control. And the worst part was, he wasn't sure he wanted to stop. He made the calls Raina had suggested, checking in with her security team, confirming the protection detail at Mrs. Patterson's building, getting an update on the investigation into the threatening messages. Nothing concrete yet, but they were working on it. Then he made one more call, to his sister in Minnesota, the one person besides Mrs. Patterson who knew how hard things had been since Sarah died. "Jake?" Rachel's voice was sharp with concern. "Is everything okay? You never call in the middle of the day." "Everything's fine. He paused, not sure how to explain any of this. "I've gotten into something complicated. I might need your help if things go sideways." "What kind of complicated? Is it Maddie? Is she okay?" "She's fine. She's great, actually." Jake looked out at the city, at the world sprawling beyond Raina's windows. "I met someone, Rachel. Someone unexpected." A long silence. Then, "Jake Carter, are you telling me you're dating again?" "I don't know what I'm telling you, but there's this woman, and she's—" He struggled for words. "She's broken in some of the same ways I am, and it's messy and complicated, and there might be danger involved, but—" "Danger? What kind of danger?" "The corporate kind. I can't explain more than that, but I wanted you to know, just in case." Rachel was quiet for a moment. "Sarah would want you to be happy," she said finally. "She told me so. In the hospital, near the end, she said, 'Don't let him close himself off. Make sure he finds someone.'" Jake's eyes stung. "She said that?" "She loved you enough to let you go. The question is whether you can love yourself enough to move forward." He didn't have an answer, but the question lodged in his chest, demanding to be addressed. "I have to go," he said. "But I'll call you soon, I promise." "You better. And Jake, be careful, but also, don't be too careful. Sometimes the scary things are the ones worth doing." He hung up and stood in the silence of the penthouse, his sister's words echoing in his mind. The scary things, worth doing. He was definitely doing something scary. The only question was whether it would be worth it. The afternoon passed in a blur. Jake found Maddie and Raina in the robotics lab, a pristine white space where mechanical arms traced intricate patterns on paper while Maddie directed them like a tiny conductor. "Daddy, look! I made a rainbow horse!" The drawing was abstract at best, colored lines swooping across the page in patterns only a child could imagine. But Maddie was beaming, and Raina was watching her with an expression of such profound longing that Jake had to look away. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." "Raina says I can make more. Can I make one for Mrs. Patterson?" "Of course you can." They spent another hour in the lab, Maddie creating increasingly elaborate designs while Raina explained how the robots worked in terms simple enough for a child to understand. Jake watched them together, his daughter and this woman who had been a stranger days ago, and felt something shift in his understanding of the world. Family wasn't just blood. It was choice, connection, the deliberate decision to let someone into your life and keep them there. Maybe that was what Sarah had meant. Maybe she'd seen that Jake would need to build a new family, not to replace her, but to continue the love she'd started. Around 4 o'clock, Raina reminded them about dinner. "I need to get ready," she said. "Maddie, do you have something nice to wear?" Maddie looked down at her clothes, the same outfit she'd been wearing when Jake picked her up. "I have my Sunday dress. Daddy packed it." "Perfect. Why don't you and your dad go get cleaned up? We'll leave at 6:30. Jake took Maddie back to the guest room where he'd stuffed her overnight bag earlier. The Sunday dress was wrinkled from the journey, but a quick session with the penthouse's impossibly fancy steamer fixed that. He helped her into the dress, pale yellow with little flowers, Sarah's favorite, and braided her hair the way she liked, though his fingers were clumsy with the task. Sarah had always been better at this. "Daddy," Maddie said as he worked on the braid, "is Raina your girlfriend?" Jake's fingers stilled. "Why do you ask?" "Because you look at her the way you used to look at Mommy, and she looks at you like she's scared and happy at the same time." 6 years old. Precocious didn't even begin to cover it. "It's complicated, sweetheart." Grown-ups always say that, because things usually are complicated. He finished the braid and turned her to face him. "But I promise, whatever happens with Raina, you'll always come first. You're my number one girl. Always." Maddie considered this. "Can I have 2 number one people? You and Mommy?" Jake's throat tightened. "You can have as many number one people as your heart can hold. Then maybe Raina can be number 3, if she's nice." "I think she'd like that," Maddie smiled, that pure, uncomplicated smile that made everything else bearable, and Jake pulled her into a hug. "I love you, sweetheart." "I love you too, Daddy, even when things are complicated." They walked out of the guest room hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. Raina was waiting in the main room, and Jake had to remind himself to breathe. She was wearing emerald green, a dress that made her eyes glow and her skin luminous. Her hair was down, falling in soft waves, and she'd added subtle makeup that highlighted rather than transformed. She looked stunning, but more than that, she looked real in a way she hadn't before. "Wow," Maddie said. "You look like a princess." Raina laughed, that surprise sound Jake was coming to love. "Thank you, Maddie. You look like a princess too." "Daddy braided my hair. He's not as good as Mommy was, but he tries." The words hung in the air. Jake waited for Raina to flinch, to pull back at the mention of Sarah, but she didn't. "I'm sure your Mommy would be very proud of how it looks," she said gently. Maddie beamed. She liked yellow. "That's why this is my favorite dress. It's a beautiful dress." Jake watched them, these 2 people from different worlds finding a common language. It felt like witnessing something sacred, the beginning of something that might, given time and care, become something profound. "We should go," Raina said, catching his eye. "The car's waiting." The restaurant was different with a child present. Eleanor and Richard Vale rose from their seats the moment they saw Maddie, their faces breaking into expressions of pure joy. "Well, well," Eleanor said, kneeling to Maddie's level. "Who is this beautiful young lady?" "I'm Maddie. Jake is my daddy." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. She looked up at Jake, then at Raina, and something passed between the women. Understanding, perhaps, or hope. "It's wonderful to meet you, Maddie. I'm Eleanor, and this is Richard." Richard gave a small wave. "Hello, Maddie. Do you like Italian food?" "I like spaghetti, with meatballs." "Then you've come to the right place." Dinner was unlike anything Jake had experienced. Maddie dominated the conversation with the fearless confidence of childhood, telling Eleanor about the robot drawings and the big windows, and how Raina's penthouse was almost like a castle, but not quite. "She's delightful," Eleanor whispered to Jake at one point when Maddie was demonstrating to Richard how she'd programmed the robots. "How long have you been raising her alone?" 18 months. Her mother died." Eleanor's hand found his, squeezing gently. I'm so sorry. That must have been devastating. It was. It still is. Jake watched his daughter, chattering happily, unaware of the weight of the conversation around her. But she's the reason I keep going. Children often are. Eleanor glanced at Raina, who was helping Maddie cut her food. I think our daughter needs that too, something to keep going for. Jake didn't know how to respond, so he just nodded. The evening continued with surprising smoothness. Maddie charmed everyone within reach, Raina relaxed more than Jake had ever seen her, and Eleanor and Richard glowed with the particular joy of grandparents who didn't have grandchildren but desperately wanted them. At some point, between the main course and dessert, Maddie crawled into Raina's lap. I'm tired, she announced. You're soft. Raina froze, her arms hovering uncertainly, unsure how to respond to the child suddenly curled against her. Is this okay? She asked Jake, her voice barely above a whisper. If it's okay with you. Raina looked down at Maddie, the tangled hair, the small body trusting her completely, and something cracked open in her expression. She wrapped her arms around the child and held her close. Yeah, she said softly. It's okay. Eleanor was openly crying now, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. Richard cleared his throat multiple times. And Jake, watching the woman he was pretending to love hold his daughter like she was something precious, realized that the pretending had stopped somewhere along the way. This was real. Whatever this was, complicated and dangerous and impossible, it was real. The car ride home was quiet. Maddie slept against Jake's shoulder, exhausted from the evening's excitement. Raina sat across from them, her eyes on the child's face. She's remarkable, she said softly. She gets it from her mother. And from you. Raina met his eyes. You've raised her alone for 18 months. You've kept her safe and happy and loved. That's not nothing, Jake. It doesn't feel like enough. It never does. But that's what makes you a good parent. You're always striving for more. Jake adjusted his hold on Maddie, her small body warm against his. What happens now? My parents leave tomorrow morning. The Nexus deal closes Tuesday. If we can get through the next few days without incident, the threat should be neutralized. And then? Raina was silent for a long moment. I don't know. What do you want to happen? It was the question Jake had been avoiding. What did he want? He wanted safety for his daughter. He wanted financial stability. He wanted to stop drowning in grief and debt and exhaustion. But he also wanted something else. Something he hadn't allowed himself to want since Sarah died. I want to see where this goes, he said finally. If you're willing. Raina's breath caught. Jake, I know it's complicated. I know there are 100 reasons why this is a bad idea, but somewhere between the fake dinners and the real conversations, something changed, and I don't think I can pretend otherwise. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to let someone in. Neither do I, but maybe we can figure it out together. The car pulled up to the building. The driver opened the door, but neither of them moved. Together, Raina said, testing the word again. Together. She reached across the space between them and took his hand, carefully, like she was handling something fragile. Okay, she said. Let's see where this goes. Jake carried Maddie into the building, Raina walking beside him, her hand still loosely holding his. The elevator rose toward the penthouse, toward whatever came next. It wasn't supposed to be this way. None of this was supposed to be real. But real had a way of happening when you weren't looking, and Jake was done looking away. The penthouse was quiet when they entered, Maddie still sleeping against Jake's shoulder, her breath warm and steady against his neck. Raina moved through the space, turning on soft lights, and for a moment it felt almost domestic, like they were a family returning home after a long evening, rather than two people caught in an elaborate web of pretense and genuine feeling. Jake carried Maddie to the guest room and laid her gently on the bed, removing her shoes and pulling the covers up to her chin. Mr. Trumpet was tucked securely under her arm, and she murmured something in her sleep, probably dreaming about robots and rainbow horses. He stood watching her for a long moment, this small person who was his entire world. The threat against her still hung heavy in his mind, a constant pressure beneath every tender moment of the evening. Someone had photographed her. Someone had sent that photo as a warning, and until they knew who and why, until the danger was eliminated, he couldn't fully exhale. When he returned to the main room, Raina was standing by the windows, her reflection ghostly against the nighttime cityscape. She'd kicked off her heels and stood barefoot on the hardwood floor, the emerald dress pooling around her ankles. "She's settled?" Raina asked without turning. "Out cold. I don't think she'll wake until morning." "She was wonderful tonight. My parents adored her. She has that effect on people." Jake moved to stand beside her, looking out at the same view. "Your parents are good people." "They are. They just want me to be happy." Raina's voice carried a weight of old exhaustion. "They've been wanting that for 3 years now, ever since Daniel." Jake let the silence stretch, giving her space to continue or not. "We were supposed to get married in September," she said finally. "The leaves were just starting to change. We'd booked this venue in Connecticut, an old estate with gardens and a chapel. Daniel had spent weeks planning the music for the ceremony. He wanted everything to be perfect." "What happened?" "We were driving back from the final venue walkthrough. It was raining, just a little, and the roads were slick. A truck ran a red light." Her voice was flat, clinical. The voice of someone who had told this story too many times. "The impact was on Daniel's side. He died before the ambulance arrived." "And you were driving?" "I was driving." She turned to face him, and in the dim light her eyes were haunted. "The police said it wasn't my fault. The insurance investigators said it wasn't my fault. Everyone said it wasn't my fault, but I was behind the wheel. I walked away with bruises and a concussion, and Daniel—" She stopped, her throat working. "Daniel didn't walk away at all." Jake reached for her hand. She let him take it, her fingers cold despite the warmth of the room. "The guilt never goes away," he said. "When Sarah was dying, I kept thinking, what if I'd noticed sooner? What if I'd pushed for more tests? What if I'd been a better husband, taken better care of her, made her go to the doctor when she said she was fine?" He squeezed her hand. "But the truth is, some things just happen. We don't get to control them. We only get to survive them." "How?" The word came out broken. "How do you survive something like that?" "One day at a time, sometimes 1 hour at a time. And eventually, not right away, but eventually, you start to notice moments when the weight lifts, just for a second, just long enough to breathe." Raina was quiet for a long moment. Then she stepped closer, resting her forehead against his shoulder. "I haven't let myself feel this in 3 years," she whispered. "I built the company bigger and bigger because it was easier to work than to feel, easier to succeed than to grieve. And now you're here, and your daughter is sleeping in my guest room, and I don't know what to do with any of it." Jake wrapped his arms around her, holding her the way he would hold someone fragile, carefully, with full awareness of how easily she might break. "You don't have to know," he said. "Neither do I. We just take it one moment at a time." They stood like that for a long while, two broken people holding each other together in the dark. Eventually, Raina pulled back. Her eyes were damp, but she wasn't crying. Wouldn't let herself cry, Jake suspected. The walls might be cracking, but they weren't down yet. "We should sleep," she said. "Tomorrow is going to be complicated." "Your parents?" "They leave at noon. But before that there's breakfast. And I'm sure my mother has 1,000 more questions about you and Maddie and our supposed relationship." Jake smiled despite himself. "We'll handle it. We've gotten pretty good at this whole fake couple thing." "Have we?" Raina's gaze held his. "Because right now it doesn't feel very fake." She didn't wait for his response. She turned and walked toward the stairs that led to her bedroom, her bare feet silent on the hardwood. "Good night, Jake." "Good night, Raina." He watched her disappear up the stairs, then made his way back to the guest room where Maddie slept. He changed into the sleep clothes that had been provided, lay down on the bed beside his daughter, and stared at the ceiling. The contract had promised $10,000 for a weekend of pretending, but somewhere along the way, the pretending had become something else entirely, and Jake had no idea how to pretend it hadn't. Morning came too quickly. Jake woke to the sensation of small fingers poking his cheek. "Daddy! Daddy! Wake up!" He opened his eyes to find Maddie inches from his face, her expression urgent. "What is it, sweetheart?" "There's a lady making pancakes. Can I have some?" Jake sat up, orienting himself. The penthouse. Raina's home. Right. That's probably Maria, the housekeeper. Let me get dressed and I'll take you to the kitchen. But I'm hungry now. He couldn't help but smile. Some things never change, no matter how strange the circumstances. They found the kitchen together, Jake in borrowed clothes, Maddie still in her pajamas with Mr. Trumpet clutched under one arm. Maria was indeed there, a middle-aged woman with warm eyes and efficient movements, and she greeted Maddie with the particular gentleness of someone who had raised children of her own. "You must be Maddie," Maria said. "Ms. Vale told me you like pancakes with chocolate chips. Is that right?" Maddie's eyes went wide. "With chocolate chips? Coming right up." Jake watched his daughter settle at the counter, chattering happily to Maria about pancakes and robots and the rainbow horse drawing she'd made yesterday. It felt almost normal, like any other morning in any other home. But it wasn't any other home, and the threat lurking behind this domesticity hadn't disappeared overnight. Raina appeared a few minutes later, dressed in casual clothes but with the alert expression of someone who'd been awake for hours. She accepted coffee from Maria with a grateful nod and sat beside Jake at the counter. "Any updates?" he asked quietly. The security team checked in, no suspicious activity overnight. The investigators are still tracing the phone number, but they've hit some walls. "What kind of walls?" "The kind that suggest professional involvement. Whoever sent those messages knows how to cover their tracks." Jake's jaw tightened. Professional involvement meant resources. Resources meant this wasn't some random threat. It was organized, deliberate, dangerous. And the Nexus deal? Still on track for Tuesday, but I've accelerated some preparations just in case. Raina's gaze flickered to Maddie, who was happily watching Maria flip pancakes. "We'll get through this, Jake. I won't let anything happen to her." "I know." He believed it. Believed her. That was the terrifying part. Breakfast with Eleanor and Richard was their final performance as a couple. The elderly pair arrived at 10 carrying gifts they'd apparently purchased during their brief time in the city. A stuffed animal for Maddie that she immediately named Princess Rainbow, a bottle of wine for Jake, and a silk scarf for their daughter that Raina accepted with visible emotion. "It was your grandmother's pattern," Eleanor explained, watching Raina unfold the delicate fabric. "I had it recreated. I thought, I wanted you to have something that connects you to her." Raina's fingers traced the intricate design. "Mom, this is—" Her voice caught. "Thank you." Jake watched the exchange, understanding for the first time the depth of what Raina had lost. Not just Daniel, but her connection to her own family. The closeness they'd clearly once shared, now strained by years of grief and distance. "We should visit more often," Richard said, his arm around Eleanor. "Not just for interrogation purposes." "Dad," Raina said, a hint of her old dryness returning. "You never interrogate." "I absolutely interrogate. I'm very subtle about it." He winked at Jake. "You passed, by the way. Flying colors. I wasn't aware I was being tested." "Everyone's being tested, son. The question is whether they know the answers." The goodbye was harder than Jake expected. Eleanor hugged him like he was already family, whispering another reminder to take care of her daughter. Richard shook his hand firmly and issued an invitation to visit them in Seattle whenever he had the chance. And then there was Maddie, who had apparently decided during the course of 24 hours that Eleanor and Richard were her new grandparents. "Will you come back?" she asked, clinging to Eleanor's hand. "We can make more robot drawings." Eleanor knelt to her level, eyes bright with unshed tears. "We'll come back, sweetheart, as often as we can. Promise?" "I promise." Jake watched his daughter extract promises from these near strangers, her open heart reaching out to fill the gaps in her life. She missed her real grandparents. His parents had passed before she was born, and Sarah's mother had moved to Florida and rarely visited. Maddie was always searching for that connection, that sense of extended family. And now she'd found it, in the most unlikely place imaginable. When the elevator doors closed behind Eleanor and Richard, the penthouse felt suddenly emptier. Raina stood at the windows, her grandmother's scarf still draped over her arm, watching something Jake couldn't see. "Thank you," she said without turning, "for this weekend, for everything. The weekend's not over yet. The performance is. My parents are gone. You could leave now if you wanted." Jake walked to stand beside her. Do you want me to leave? No. The word came out quickly, almost before she'd finished asking. But I also don't want you to stay out of obligation, or because of the money, or because you feel trapped by the threat against your daughter. I don't feel trapped. Then what do you feel? Jake considered the question. He thought about Sarah, about the life they'd built and the love they'd shared and the gaping wound her death had left in his chest. He thought about the 18 months since, the grinding exhaustion of single parenthood, the loneliness that crept in during quiet moments when Maddie was asleep and there was no one to share the silence with. And he thought about Raina, brilliant and broken, and desperately reaching for something she'd convinced herself she didn't deserve. I feel like something is starting, he said finally. Something I didn't plan for and don't fully understand, but I don't want to walk away from it. Not yet. Raina turned to face him. In the morning light, without the armor of business attire and careful makeup, she looked younger than her years, vulnerable in a way she rarely allowed herself to be. I haven't let anyone get close since Daniel, she said. I convinced myself it was safer to be alone, that caring about someone meant giving them the power to destroy you. And now? Now I'm not sure anymore. She reached up, her fingers brushing his cheek. You came into my life because I was desperate enough to post a Craigslist ad for a fake boyfriend. And somehow, in less than 3 days, you've made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. Jake caught her hand, holding it against his face. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe not. The moment stretched between them, charged, uncertain, full of possibility. Jake leaned closer, and Raina met him halfway. And when their lips touched, it wasn't performance or pretense or anything they could explain away. It was just real. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, two people testing new territory. But then Raina's hand slid to the back of his neck, and Jake's arms wrapped around her waist, and the softness gave way to something more urgent, more honest. They broke apart breathless, foreheads touching. That wasn't in the contract, Raina whispered. Neither was falling for a Craigslist stranger, but here we are. She laughed. That surprise sound he was coming to love. We're doing this all wrong. Probably. But since when do either of us do things the conventional way? Before she could respond, Jake's phone rang. The sound was jarring in the intimate moment, harsh and demanding, pulling them back to reality. He glanced at the screen. Unknown number. His blood went cold. Don't answer it, Raina said, her voice tight. I have to. What if it's about Maddie? He accepted the call and pressed the phone to his ear. Mr. Carter. The voice was male, smooth, vaguely familiar in a way Jake couldn't place. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. Who is this? A friend, or at least someone who could be a friend if you make the right choices. Jake's grip tightened on the phone. What do you want? I want to give you an opportunity. The messages you've received, consider them a preview, a warning of what could happen if Ms. Vale proceeds with her acquisition of Nexus Technologies. Victor Westridge. A pause. Then a low chuckle. I see Ms. Vale has been talking. Yes, Mr. Carter. This is Victor Westridge, and I'm calling to offer you a deal. Raina had moved closer, her ear near the phone, listening. Her face had gone pale. What kind of deal? Walk away. Take your daughter and disappear. I'll wire $50,000 to an account of your choosing, and you'll never hear from me again. Westridge's voice dripped false friendliness. Everyone wins. You get money. I get what I want, and your little girl stays safe. Jake felt the rage building in his chest, hot and dangerous and barely contained. You threatened a child, a 6-year-old child. I made a business calculation. Children are leverage, Mr. Carter. Everyone knows that. You're sick. I'm practical. There's a difference. Westridge's tone hardened. The offer expires at midnight tonight. If you're still in that penthouse tomorrow morning, the consequences will escalate. And I promise you, you won't like what escalation looks like. The line went dead. Jake stood frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear, his mind racing through possibilities and scenarios and terrible outcomes. Jake! Raina's voice was strained. Jake, what did he say? He told her. Every word. By the time he finished, Raina's pallor had been replaced by something else, a cold, focused fury that transformed her features. He called you directly, she said. He's getting bolder. That means he's desperate. Or confident. Desperate, she insisted. The Nexus deal represents a major shift in market power. If I acquire them, Westridge loses his biggest competitive advantage. He's been trying to stop this for months through legal channels, lobbying, everything legitimate. This, threatening children, making intimidating phone calls, this is a last resort. That doesn't make it less dangerous. No, but it means he's running out of options. She began pacing, her mind visibly working. If we can document his involvement, prove he's behind the threats, we can have him arrested. Corporate intimidation, criminal threatening, harassment, there are dozens of charges that could stick. How do we prove it? The phone call. Did your phone record it? Jake checked. No, I don't have recording enabled. Raina's jaw tightened. Then we need another way. Something concrete. Something that will hold up in court. She strode to her office, Jake following. She pulled up files on her computer, scrolling through documents and communications with the kind of focused intensity he'd seen in surgeons and soldiers. Here, she said finally. 3 months ago, one of my board members received an anonymous tip about irregularities in the Nexus acquisition. The tip was false, designed to trigger an investigation and delay the deal. We traced it to a disposable email account, but the investigation went nowhere. You think Westridge was behind it? I'm certain he was. But thinking and proving are different things. She pulled up another file. And here, 2 months ago, someone broke into our server architecture and tried to access the Nexus due diligence files. We stopped them before they got anything sensitive, but we couldn't identify the attackers. A pattern? Exactly. Westridge has been escalating for months. The threats against Maddie are just the latest step. She turned to face him. We need to set a trap. Jake's stomach dropped. What kind of trap? The kind that gets him to expose himself. If I can get him alone, get him talking about what he's done, get it on record, absolutely not. Jake, you want to confront a man who threatened my daughter? A man who clearly has no ethical boundaries? What if he has security? What if he has weapons? I'll have security too. My own people, nearby. No. Jake stepped closer, his hands finding her shoulders. I'm not letting you put yourself in danger. Not for me, not for Maddie, not for a business deal. This isn't about the business deal anymore. Raina's eyes blazed. This is about protecting people She stopped, the word catching in her throat. People you what? She looked away. People I care about. The admission hung between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to fully address. There has to be another way, Jake said. Something that doesn't involve you walking into a lion's den. I'm open to suggestions. Before Jake could respond, a small voice came from the doorway. Daddy? They both turned. Maddie stood there in her pajamas, Princess Rainbow clutched in one hand and Mr. Trumpet in the other, her face troubled. What's wrong, sweetheart? Jake crossed to her, kneeling to her level. I heard you talking about the bad man. Her voice trembled. Is someone trying to hurt us? Jake's heart broke. She'd heard. Despite their efforts to shield her, she'd heard. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. No one is going to hurt you, baby. I promise. But you sounded scared, and Raina sounded scared too. Jake looked at Raina over Maddie's shoulder. Her expression was anguished, the realization of what her world had brought into this child's life. Sometimes grown-ups get worried about things, Jake said carefully. But that doesn't mean the bad things will happen. We're very safe here. Raina has lots of people who make sure nothing bad can get in. Like knights? Exactly like knights. He leaned back, brushing tears from her cheeks. And you know what else? What? You're the bravest girl I know. Remember when you stayed at Mrs. Patterson's all by yourself? Remember when you helped me clean the whole apartment last week? You can be brave about this too. Maddie sniffled. I can be brave. I know you can. Raina had moved to join them, kneeling on the floor beside Jake. Maddie, I'm sorry we scared you. We didn't mean for you to hear that. It's okay. Maddie's lower lip still trembled, but she was fighting it. I know you're trying to protect me. That's what grown-ups do. That's exactly what we're trying to do. Raina reached out, gently touching Maddie's hair. And we're going to keep you safe. I promise. Maddie studied Raina with those two serious eyes. Are you going to be my dad's girlfriend for real? The question cut through the tension like a blade. Jake felt heat rise to his face. Maddie, it's okay if you are. Maddie's voice was matter of fact. Mommy said it was okay if Daddy found someone new to love. She told me before she went to heaven. She said Daddy has a big heart and there's room for lots of people in it. Jake's throat constricted. He remembered that conversation, one of Sarah's last lucid days when she'd held Maddie and whispered things he hadn't been able to hear. He'd always wondered what she'd said. Now he knew. Your mommy was very wise, Raina said softly, and very kind. She was the best mommy. Maddie's chin trembled. But she had to go away. And now Daddy is sad all the time, even when he pretends he's not. Jake pulled her close again, hiding his face in her hair so she wouldn't see the tears he couldn't stop. I'm getting better, baby, he managed. It takes time, but I'm getting better. Maybe Raina can help. Maddie's voice was muffled against his shoulder. She seems nice and she has good pancakes. Despite everything, the fear, the threats, the impossible situation, Jake laughed. It came out wet and choked, but it was real. Maybe she can, he said. We'll see. Raina's hand found his, squeezing gently. And there, on the floor of a billionaire's penthouse, with his daughter in his arms and his heart cracked wide open, Jake felt something shift. The pretending was over. Whatever came next would be real. The afternoon brought security briefings and strategy sessions and endless phone calls. Jake stayed with Maddie while Raina worked, playing quiet games and watching movies on the massive TV she'd been so excited about. But even as he went through the motions of normalcy, his mind was elsewhere, on Westridge's threat, on the midnight deadline, on what would happen when it passed. At 5 o'clock, Raina emerged from her office with a new resolve in her eyes. I've made a decision, she said. The Nexus closing is being moved up. We're finalizing tomorrow morning instead of Tuesday. Can you do that? I can do whatever I want. I'm the CEO. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. There will be objections, but once the deal is done, those objections become irrelevant. And Westridge? Once Nexus is mine, his leverage disappears. The threats become pointless. He'll either back off or make a mistake that exposes him. What if he escalates before the closing? Raina's jaw tightened. Then we deal with it. But I won't let him win by delaying. That's exactly what he wants. Jake considered the plan. It was aggressive, risky, but it had the virtue of being proactive. Sitting and waiting for Westridge to make his next move felt like torture. What do you need me to do? Stay here with Maddie. Keep her safe. Keep her calm. I'll be at the office most of the night, making sure everything is in place. You're leaving? I have to. The paperwork alone is... She stopped, seeing his expression. I'll have a security team here. You won't be alone. Jake wanted to argue, wanted to insist she stay where he could see her, but he understood the reality. This was her world, her company, her battle. He couldn't fight it for her. Be careful, he said instead. Always. She moved toward him, then hesitated, glancing at Maddie, who was absorbed in a cartoon. Jake, She stopped, started again. What you said earlier about something starting between us, I want you to know that wasn't just the moment talking. I meant it. I know you did. And whatever happens tomorrow, whatever comes next, I don't regret any of it. Not the Craigslist ad, not the fake relationship, not any of it, because it brought you here. She kissed him then, quickly, before he could respond, and then she was gone, striding toward the elevator with the focused determination of a general going to war. Jake watched her go, his heart full of things he hadn't said. There would be time. Once this was over, once Maddie was safe, there would be time for all the things that needed saying. He had to believe that. The hours crept by. Jake ordered dinner from the kitchen. Maria had left, but the fridge was stocked with easy meals. And he and Maddie ate together at the big table, making up stories about Princess Rainbow's adventures. She's an explorer, Maddie decided. She goes to the moon and finds aliens, but they're nice aliens who like chocolate. Chocolate-loving aliens. I like it. And Mr. Trumpet goes with her. He's her best friend. Everyone needs a best friend. Maddie was quiet for a moment, pushing food around her plate. Daddy, is Raina going to be okay? What do you mean, sweetheart? She looked worried when she left, like something bad might happen. Jake reached across the table, taking his daughter's hand. Raina is one of the strongest people I've ever met. Whatever she's dealing with, she can handle it. But what if she can't? What if the bad man hurts her? Jake's throat tightened. How do you explain adult dangers to a child? How do you balance truth with protection? The bad man doesn't want to hurt Raina, he said carefully. He wants to stop her from doing something important. But Raina is very smart, and she has lots of people helping her. She'll be okay. Maddie didn't look convinced, but she nodded anyway, trusting him because that was what children did. Jake hoped he deserved that trust. After dinner, he got Maddie ready for bed. She was asleep within minutes, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the past 2 days. Jake sat beside her, watching her breathe, letting the quiet settle around him. His phone buzzed. A text from Raina. Closing documents finalized, meeting with lawyers now, everything on track for 9 a.m. He typed back, "Be safe. We'll be here when you get back." Well, 3 dots appeared, then, "I'm counting on that." Jake set the phone aside and leaned his head back against the wall. The penthouse was silent except for the hum of the ventilation system and the distant sounds of the city far below. Somewhere out there, Westridge was waiting, watching, planning his next move. And somewhere out there, Raina was fighting, not just for her company, but for them. For the fragile, impossible thing they'd started building together. Jake closed his eyes and let himself hope. The call came at 11:47. Jake was dozing in the chair beside Maddie's bed, jerked awake by the vibration of his phone. Unknown number again. His heart hammered as he answered. "What do you want?" "It's Marcus Chen, head of Ms. Vale's security team." The voice was clipped, professional. "There's been an incident." Jake was on his feet immediately. "What kind of incident?" "Ms. Vale received a message at the office about an hour ago. Handwritten note, delivered by courier. It contained information about you and your daughter, specific details that weren't public knowledge." Jake's blood ran cold. "What details?" "Your address, your workplace, your daughter's school." A pause. "And a photo of your wife's grave." The world tilted. Jake grabbed the doorframe to steady himself. "They went to Sarah's grave?" "It appears so. The message was clear: stop the Nexus acquisition or face consequences." "Where is Raina? Is she safe?" "Ms. Vale is here at the office, under protection. But, sir, she's made a decision you should know about." Jake's stomach dropped. "What decision?" "She's going to meet with Westridge, tonight. She believes she can get him to admit to the threats on record." "What? No, you have to stop her." "I've tried, sir. She's determined. She says this is the only way to end it permanently." Jake was already moving, grabbing his shoes, looking around for something to write a note on. Where's she meeting him? "His corporate headquarters. She's leaving in 20 minutes. "Stall her. Tell her I'm coming." "Sir, I don't think—" "Tell her I'll be there." He hung up and turned to find Maddie sitting up in bed, her eyes wide and frightened. "Daddy? What's wrong?" Jake's heart broke. He couldn't leave her, but he couldn't let Raina walk into danger alone. "I need to help Raina," he said, kneeling beside the bed. "Can you be brave for me? Stay here with the security people until I get back?" Maddie's lip trembled. "I'm scared." "I know, baby. I'm scared too. But sometimes we have to do scary things to help the people we care about." "Like in the stories? Where the hero saves everyone?" "Exactly like that." He kissed her forehead. "Lock the door after I leave. Don't open it for anyone except the security team. They'll show you their badges through the peephole. Can you do that?" She nodded, her small face fierce with determination. "I can be brave." "That's my girl." Jake called down to the security team, explained the situation, made sure 2 of them would be stationed directly outside the guest room door. Then he took the elevator down to the garage where an armored car waited. Marcus Chen had apparently anticipated his response. The drive across the city felt endless. Jake stared out the window at the passing lights, his mind racing through scenarios. Raina walking into Westridge's building, confronting a man who had threatened a child, trying to capture a confession from someone who had clearly been planning this for months. What if it went wrong? What if Westridge had anticipated exactly this? What if Raina's strength and determination led her into a trap she couldn't escape? The car pulled up to Vale Technologies' headquarters, a gleaming tower that rivaled Raina's penthouse for sheer vertical ambition. Jake jumped out before it fully stopped and sprinted toward the entrance. He found Raina in the lobby, surrounded by her security team, dressed in a sharp black suit that made her look like a warrior preparing for battle. When she saw him, something flickered across her face. Surprise, relief, fear. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "Neither should you." He grabbed her hands. "Don't do this. There has to be another way." "There isn't. He won't stop unless I stop him. And the only way to do that is to get proof of what he's done." "Then let me come with you." "Absolutely not. You have a daughter to think about. And you have a company, employees, parents who love you." He held her gaze. "People who need you to come back safe." Raina's expression softened. "Jake, you said this was real. You said you wanted to see where it goes, but we can't do that if you get yourself killed." "I'm not going to get killed." "You don't know that." They stood in silence, the weight of everything unspoken pressing down on them. Finally, Raina spoke. "He's expecting me alone. If I show up with anyone else, he'll know something's wrong. Then I'll wait outside, close enough to help if something goes wrong. Jake, I'm not letting you do this alone." His voice was firm. "You said you wanted someone to see you, really see you. Well, I see you, and I'm not walking away." Raina studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Outside, with the security team. If I'm not out in 30 minutes, you come in." 15 minutes. 20. Fine. 20. He pulled her into a fierce embrace. "Be careful, please." "I will." She pulled back, her eyes bright. "Jake, if something does go wrong, don't. I need you to know. Tell me when you get back." She looked at him, really looked the way she had that first day in the cafe, and nodded. Then she turned and walked toward the waiting car, toward the confrontation that would determine everything. Jake watched her go, his heart in his throat. 20 minutes. That was all he had to wait. But as the car pulled away and disappeared into the night, 20 minutes felt like forever. The minutes crawled by like hours. Jake stood in the shadows outside Westridge Technologies' headquarters, his eyes fixed on the gleaming tower that swallowed Raina whole. The building rose 40 stories into the night sky, its windows dark except for scattered lights on the upper floors where the powerful made decisions that shaped the lives of everyone below. Marcus Chen stood beside him, earpiece in, monitoring communications from the security team positioned around the building. 2 more operatives waited in vehicles at strategic exits. Everything was in place, everything except certainty that Raina would walk out alive. "She's through the lobby," Marcus reported, his voice low. "Elevator heading to the 38th floor. That's where Westridge keeps his private office." Jake's hands clenched at his sides. "Can we hear what's happening?" "She's wearing a wire. Audio only. Video would have been detected by his security." Marcus touched his earpiece, adjusting something. "Connection's clean so far." Jake waited, barely breathing. Somewhere above him, the woman he was falling for was walking into a confrontation with a man who had no moral boundaries. A man who used children as leverage. A man who had photographed his wife's grave just to prove a point. The night air was cold, but Jake barely felt it. All his awareness was focused upward, toward the 38th floor, toward Raina. "She's entering his office," Marcus said. "Here we go." The conversation crackled through Marcus's earpiece, faint but audible. Jake moved closer, straining to hear. "Ms. Vale." Westridge's voice was smooth, cultured, the voice of a man who had never been denied anything in his life. "I must admit, I'm surprised you came. I half expected you to send lawyers." "Lawyers come later." Raina's voice was steady, controlled. "Right now, I want to understand what you're hoping to accomplish." "Accomplish? I'm simply protecting my interests, the same thing you'd do in my position." "By threatening a child?" A pause. Jake held his breath. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play games with me, Victor. I know it was you. The photos, the messages, the note tonight with information about Jake's family. You've made your position very clear." "Have I?" Westridge sounded almost amused. "And yet you came here alone. No security, No witnesses. If I were the monster you're suggesting, wouldn't that be rather foolish? Maybe. Or maybe I'm counting on your ego being bigger than your caution. Jake found himself almost smiling despite his terror. That was Raina, brilliant even in the face of danger. The Nexus acquisition closes in the morning, she continued. Whatever you're planning, you've run out of time. Have I? There was movement, footsteps, the clink of glass. Drink? No? Your loss. It's excellent scotch. A long pause, and when Westridge spoke again, his voice had shifted, harder, colder. Let me be direct with you, Raina. The Nexus deal doesn't close tomorrow. It doesn't close at all. That's not your decision. It became my decision when you refused to listen to reason. I tried the legitimate routes, legal challenges, regulatory complaints, board pressure. You blocked every single one, so I was forced to pursue alternative strategies. Jake's heart hammered. This was it. Westridge was admitting his involvement. Alternative strategies, Raina repeated. You mean threatening a 6-year-old girl? Children are effective leverage. Everyone has a weakness, Ms. Vale. For some, it's money. For others, reputation. For Jake Carter, it's his daughter. Another pause. And for you, apparently, it's him. Jake has nothing to do with this, doesn't he? You post an advertisement for a fake boyfriend and end up with someone who makes you feel things you haven't felt in years. Someone who reminds you what it's like to be human instead of a corporate machine. Westridge's voice dripped with contempt. I've watched you, Raina. For 3 years, you've been untouchable. No relationships, no vulnerabilities, no cracks in the armor. And then this nobody from Craigslist walks into your life and suddenly you're readable again. You've been watching me for 3 years? I've been watching everyone who threatens my interests. You just happen to be the most persistent. Marcus was already on his phone, coordinating with someone. We're getting good material, he murmured to Jake. Keep going, keep him talking. But Jake barely heard him. His attention was fixed on the conversation above, on Raina's voice as she navigated this verbal minefield. So what do you want, Victor? What's the endgame here? I told you, the Nexus deal dies. You step back, issue a press release about regulatory concerns or market conditions. I don't care what excuse you use. The acquisition fails, and everyone goes back to their corners. And if I refuse? Then Jake Carter's daughter has an accident. Nothing fatal. I'm not a monster, but something that sends a message. A fall at school, a car that runs a red light. The possibilities are endless. Jake's vision went red. His body moved before his mind caught up, toward the building, toward the elevator, toward the 38th floor where that man was calmly discussing hurting his daughter. Marcus caught his arm. Wait, she needs more. He just threatened to hurt my kid. I know, and we recorded it. But we need him to confirm he's behind the previous incidents too. If we only have tonight's conversation, he could claim it was just talk, empty threats. Jake wanted to argue, wanted to charge upstairs and put his hands around Westridge's throat, but some rational part of his brain understood the logic. They needed an airtight case. They needed proof so overwhelming that no lawyer could spin it, no money could buy it away. He forced himself to stop, to wait, to trust that Raina knew what she was doing. You sent the photos of Maddie, Raina said above. You hired someone to follow her. I have resources. And the note tonight, the picture of Sarah's grave. I thought that was a particularly nice touch, a reminder of what loss feels like, of what Jake has already been through and could go through again. You're sick. I'm practical. There's a difference. Westridge's voice hardened. Now, do we have an understanding? The Nexus deal is off. You make it look like a business decision, and we never speak of this conversation again. And if I agree, you'll leave Jake and his daughter alone? Completely. They're of no interest to me except as leverage against you. Once the deal is dead, they're irrelevant. The silence stretched. Jake could picture Raina up there, weighing her options, calculating moves. I need time to think, she said finally. You have until 6 a.m. After that, the accidents start. 6 a.m. Fine. Movement again, Raina preparing to leave. Jake exhaled slowly, and then everything went wrong. Before you go, Westridge said, his voice taking on a different quality, suspicious, alert. Let me see your phone. Excuse me? Your phone. Now. I don't have to. I could. You're wearing something, I can tell. Body language gives it away every time. Footsteps, aggressive now. Did you really think you could come in here and record me? Do you think I'm stupid? Victor, security. Marcus was already moving. Team, go. Now. Jake didn't wait for permission. He sprinted toward the building entrance, Marcus right behind him, the two operatives from the vehicles converging from different directions. The lobby security tried to stop them, but Marcus flashed credentials, something official-looking that made them step aside, and then they were in the elevator, rising, the floor numbers climbing too slowly. Through Marcus's earpiece, Jake could hear chaos. Westridge shouting. Raina's voice, defiant but strained, the sounds of a struggle. Get your hands off me. Where's the wire? Where is it? You're making a mistake. A sharp crack, something being broken, or someone being hit. And then a woman's scream. Not Raina's voice, something else. Glass shattering, and then silence. The elevator doors opened on 38. Jake was through them before they fully parted, racing down the corridor toward the commotion. He could see security guards ahead, confused and uncertain, unsure whether to stop him or stand aside. He didn't give them the choice. The door to Westridge's office was open. Inside, the scene was chaos, broken glass, overturned furniture, a woman who must have been Westridge's assistant cowering in the corner, and by the shattered floor-to-ceiling window, a gaping hole in the glass, cold wind rushing in. Jake's heart stopped. Where is she? His voice came out strangled. Where's Raina? Westridge stood by the window, his face pale, his hands shaking. She fell. She fell? Jake grabbed him by the collar, slamming him against the wall. What did you do? I pushed her. I didn't mean she was at the window, and I just... The world narrowed to a single point of white-hot rage. Jake's fist connected with Westridge's face before he consciously decided to throw it. The man crumpled, blood streaming from his nose, but Jake didn't stop. He hit him again, and would have kept going if Marcus hadn't pulled him back. Jake, stop. We need him alive. He pushed her out a window, and he's going to prison for it, but not if you kill him first. Jake struggled against Marcus's grip, his vision swimming with tears and rage. Through the broken window, the city sprawled 38 stories below, an impossible distance, a fatal drop. Raina was down there somewhere. Broken on the pavement, gone, just like Sarah, just like everyone he loved. Call an ambulance, someone was saying. Call the police. But Jake barely heard. He stood at the shattered window looking down at the darkness below and felt his heart shatter along with the glass. The next minutes were a blur of noise and movement. Police arrived, took Westridge into custody, cordoned off the scene. Paramedics came and went, for Westridge's injuries, for the assistant's shock, for Jake's bleeding knuckles that he didn't remember hurting. Marcus handled the logistics, explaining the situation to the officers, providing the recording that proved Westridge's guilt. Words floated past Jake. Attempted murder, conspiracy, criminal threatening. But none of them registered. All he could think about was Raina. Raina in the cafe, sharp and guarded, offering him money for a weekend of pretending. Raina in the penthouse, vulnerable and broken, admitting she didn't know how to let anyone in. Raina with Maddie, kneeling on the floor, promising to keep her safe. Raina in his arms, kissing him like it meant something, like they had a future. And now Raina was gone. Except, Sir? A paramedic appeared at his elbow. You need to come with me. I need to stay. She's alive. Jake's brain short-circuited. What? The woman who fell. She's alive. There's a construction scaffold on the 20th floor. She hit it on the way down. Broke her fall enough that... The paramedic shook his head. It's a miracle. A genuine miracle. She's in bad shape, but she's alive. They're taking her to Presbyterian now. Jake stared at him, unable to process the words. Alive. Raina was alive. He was moving before he finished thinking, sprinting for the elevator, for the street, for the hospital where Raina lay broken but breathing. She was alive, and Jake was going to make sure she stayed that way. Presbyterian Hospital was a controlled chaos of fluorescent lights and urgent voices. Jake burst through the emergency room doors like a man possessed, shouting Raina's name until a security guard stopped him. Sir, you need to calm down. What was she? His girlfriend? His fake girlfriend? The woman he was falling in love with? Raina Vale. She was brought here from Westridge Technologies. She fell from a building. The guard's expression shifted. Recognition. Sympathy. The Vale case. She's in surgery now. If you'll wait in the family area. Surgery? Multiple fractures, internal injuries. The doctors are working on her. The guard's voice was kind but firm. The best thing you can do is wait. Wait. Jake had been waiting his whole life, it seemed. Waiting for things to get better. Waiting for Sarah to survive. Waiting for the grief to lift. Waiting for something that felt like hope. And now he was waiting again. He found the family waiting area, a small, sterile room with uncomfortable chairs and magazines no one ever read. He sat, stood, paced, sat again. His mind raced through prayers he hadn't said since childhood and bargains he had no right to make. Please let her live. Please let her be okay. Please give us a chance to figure out what this is. Time lost meaning. Minutes felt like hours. Hours felt like days. At some point, his phone buzzed. A message from the security team. Maddie was safe, still sleeping. They hadn't told her anything yet. Jake typed back a response he couldn't remember sending and went back to staring at the wall. He must have dozed because suddenly there was a hand on his shoulder and a doctor's face swimming into view. Mr. Carter? He was on his feet instantly. How is she? The doctor, a tired woman with kind eyes, consulted her chart. Ms. Vale came through surgery. She has a fractured pelvis, 3 broken ribs, a collapsed lung, and a severe concussion. We've stabilized the internal bleeding, but the next 24 hours will be critical. But she's alive. She's alive. And frankly, she shouldn't be. That scaffold saved her life. If she'd fallen another 20 feet... The doctor shook her head. Someone was watching out for her. Jake's knees went weak. He grabbed the back of a chair to steady himself. Can I see her? She's in intensive care and heavily sedated. Family only for now. I'm not... He stopped. What was he? A stranger she'd hired from the internet? A man she'd known for 3 days? I'm her... He's family. The voice came from behind him. Jake turned to find Eleanor and Richard Vale standing in the doorway, their faces drawn with fear and exhaustion. He's family, Eleanor repeated, moving to Jake's side. Whatever you need to tell him, you can tell us all. The doctor nodded and led them through double doors, down corridors that smelled of antiseptic and grief, to a room where Raina lay surrounded by machines. She looked small in the hospital bed. Wrong. The woman who commanded boardrooms and built empires, reduced to tubes and wires and monitors that beeped her vital signs to an indifferent universe. Jake moved to her bedside. Her face was bruised, her arm in a cast, her breathing assisted by machines. But she was breathing. That was what mattered. She was still here. Oh, sweetheart. Eleanor moved to Raina's other side, tears streaming down her face. What happened? The police said someone pushed her? Victor Westridge. Jake's voice was rough. She went to confront him, to get evidence of his threats, and he... The words caught in his throat. Threats? Richard's voice was sharp. What threats? Jake told them everything. The fake boyfriend arrangement, the threatening messages, Westridge's corporate war against the Nexus acquisition, the decision to confront him, to get a recorded confession, the fall. By the time he finished, Eleanor was sobbing quietly, and Richard's face was a mask of controlled fury. She did this to protect you, Richard said, and your daughter. She did this because she thought it was the only way. Jake looked at Raina's bruised face. She was trying to end it, once and for all. That's our daughter. Eleanor's voice was thick with tears. Always trying to solve everything herself, never asking for help. She asked me, Jake said quietly. In her own way, she asked. And I wasn't enough. You're here. Richard moved to stand beside him. That's what matters. You're here, and she's alive, and that bastard is in custody. Is he? Marcus Chen called us on the way. Westridge has been arrested on charges of attempted murder, criminal threatening, conspiracy. The recording Raina made will ensure he never sees the outside of a prison again. Richard's jaw tightened. It doesn't feel like enough. It's not, but it's something. They stood in silence, watching Raina breathe. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. Proof of life, proof of hope. What happens now? Eleanor asked. Jake didn't have an answer. He wasn't sure there was one. The hours blurred together. Jake refused to leave Raina's side except for brief trips to the bathroom and forced meals from the cafeteria. Eleanor and Richard took shifts, one of them always present, as if their collective presence could will her back to consciousness. At some point, Marcus arrived with updates. Westridge was talking, trying to cut a deal by giving up associates, providing evidence of other crimes. The Nexus acquisition was on hold pending Raina's recovery. The company was in crisis mode, but her executives were holding things together. None of it mattered to Jake. The only thing that mattered was the woman in the bed. On the second day, Maddie was brought to the hospital. Jake had debated whether to expose her to this, the machines, the tubes, the stark reality of Raina's injuries, but in the end, he decided she had a right to know. A right to say goodbye if it came to that. But Maddie surprised him. She walked into the room with her characteristic seriousness, studied Raina for a long moment, then climbed into the chair beside the bed. She's sleeping, Maddie announced. Yes, sweetheart. The doctors are helping her rest so she can get better. Like when Mommy was sick? Jake's throat tightened. A little like that. Maddie reached out and touched Raina's hand, gently, carefully. Wake up soon, okay? We still have to go to the zoo. You promised. Raina hadn't promised that. Jake had. But somehow Maddie had decided the promise applied to all of them. They stayed until the nurses gently suggested Maddie needed real food and real sleep. Jake carried her out, her small body heavy with exhaustion. And for a moment he let himself imagine a future where this was normal, where they were a family. If Raina woke up, if she still wanted them, if any of this survived the chaos they'd been through. On the third day, Raina opened her eyes. Jake was alone with her, the early morning light filtering through the hospital blinds. He'd been reading something on his phone, news articles about Westridge's arrest, speculation about Veil Technology's future, when he heard a small sound. He looked up. Raina's eyes were open, clouded with pain and confusion, but open. Hey, his voice cracked. Hey, you're okay. You're in the hospital. You're safe. She blinked slowly, processing. Her lips moved, forming words that didn't quite make it to sound. Jake leaned closer. What is it? What do you need? A whisper, barely audible. Jake, I'm here. I'm right here. Her eyes focused on his face, and something in them shifted. Recognition, relief, emotion too complex to name. Maddie, she managed. Is Maddie? She's safe. She's been here. She made you a card. Jake gestured to the construction paper creation taped to the wall, crayon drawings of princesses and elephants and a wobbly heart. She misses you. Tears leaked from the corners of Raina's eyes. I wasn't sure You're here. That's what matters. Jake took her hand, careful of the IV lines. You're here, and Westridge is in custody, and the recording you made is going to put him away for a very long time. The Nexus deal can wait. Everything can wait. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her bruised knuckles. Just focus on getting better. Raina's gaze searched his face. You stayed. Of course I stayed. The contract is over. You don't have to... I'm not here because of a contract. Jake's voice was fierce. I'm here because He stopped, the word catching in his throat. Was it too soon? Too much? I'm here because you matter. To me. To Maddie. To everyone who cares about you. Raina was quiet for a moment, her eyes bright with tears and something else. Hope, maybe. Or wonder. I fell out a window, she said finally. You did. I should be dead. But you're not. There was a scaffold, construction equipment. I hit it and... She shook her head slightly, wincing at the movement. I remember falling. I remember thinking about Daniel, about how maybe we'd finally be together again. Jake's grip on her hand tightened. And then I thought about you, about Maddie, about everything I'd miss if I let go. She met his eyes. I think that's why I held on, why I grabbed for the scaffold instead of just falling, Jake couldn't speak. His throat was too tight, his eyes too blurred. I haven't wanted to live in 3 years, Raina continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Not really. I've been going through the motions, building the company, making money, achieving things that don't mean anything. And then you showed up with your Goodwill shirt and your sad eyes and your beautiful daughter, and suddenly, she took a shaky breath. Suddenly, I wanted to live again. Jake leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers. Then live. Please. Live and get better and come home. We'll figure out the rest together. Together, Raina echoed. I've been telling you since the beginning. Together. She made a sound that might have been a laugh if it hadn't hurt so much. You're stubborn. So are you. That's why we work. The door opened softly. Eleanor appeared, her face breaking into tears when she saw Raina awake. Oh, baby. Oh, thank goodness. Jake stepped back to let Eleanor embrace her daughter, carefully, mindful of the injuries. Richard appeared moments later, and then Maddie, who had apparently been waiting in the hallway. Raina! Maddie clambered onto the bed with the fearlessness of childhood. You're awake! Did you see my card? I saw it. Raina's voice was weak but warm. It's beautiful. I drew Princess Rainbow and Mr. Trumpet and the nice aliens. They're waiting for you to get better so we can all go on adventures. Adventures sound nice. Jake watched them, his daughter chattering happily, Raina listening with exhausted tenderness, Eleanor and Richard hovering nearby with relief written across their faces. This, he realized, this was what family looked like. Not the family he'd planned, not the life he'd imagined, but something real and unexpected and worth fighting for. The days that followed were a blur of doctors and physical therapists and slow, painful progress. Raina's injuries were severe. The pelvis fracture alone would require months of recovery, but she attacked rehabilitation with the same fierce determination she'd brought to building her company. Jake split his time between the hospital and the penthouse, where he and Maddie had essentially moved in. The guest room became their room. Maria made breakfasts and dinners. The security team that had once been an emergency measure became a permanent fixture. And slowly, gradually, the crisis faded into something that felt almost like normal life. Westridge was arraigned on multiple federal charges. The recording Raina had made became evidence in a prosecution that promised to dismantle his empire piece by piece. His lawyers tried everything: mental health defenses, claims of entrapment, even an attempt to argue that Raina had fallen accidentally. But the weight of evidence was overwhelming. He would spend decades in prison. That was the expert consensus. Decades. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was justice, of a sort. The Nexus deal closed 2 weeks after Raina regained consciousness. She signed the final documents from her hospital bed, surrounded by lawyers and executives who had never seen their CEO in a hospital gown. This feels anticlimactic, she said after the last signature was dry. This feels like victory, Jake countered. You won. We won. She looked at him. I couldn't have done this without you. You could have. You would have found another way. Maybe. But I'm glad I didn't have to. She reached for his hand, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. Jake, I need to tell you something. What? The contract, the $10,000. She took a breath. I want to void it. Jake blinked. Void it? Why? Because I don't want there to be any financial component to this. Whatever this is, whatever we're building, I don't want it tainted by the terms of our original agreement. She met his eyes. I want you here because you want to be here, not because I paid you. Raina, I stopped being here for the money days ago. I know, but I need the record to reflect that. I need it to be clean. She squeezed his hand. Keep the $5,000 you already received. Consider it payment for the weekend with my parents, as originally agreed. But the rest can't happen. I won't let money be part of our story. Jake considered this. He understood what she was saying. The need to build something pure, something untainted by the transactional nature of their beginning. Okay, he said. The contract is void. Thank you. But I'm keeping the clothes. Those suits are really nice. She laughed. That surprised, genuine sound he loved. You can keep the clothes. And Maddie keeps Princess Rainbow and all the robot drawings. Obviously. And I keep you. He leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to her lips. That's non-negotiable. I can live with that. They stayed like that for a moment, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. Outside the hospital window, the city hummed with its endless energy. Inside, everything was quiet. I love you, Jake said. The words came out before he could second-guess them, before he could worry about timing or appropriateness or the fact that they'd known each other for less than a month. Raina's eyes widened. Jake, you don't have to say it back. It's too soon, I know that. We barely know each other and everything has been chaos, and I love you too. Jake stopped mid-ramble. What? I love you too. Her voice was steady, certain. I've known since the dinner with my parents. Maybe before that. When you stood up to me about respect and being treated as an equal, no one had talked to me like that in years. And I thought, this person sees me, really sees me. I do see you. And I see you. She touched his face, her fingers tracing the lines of exhaustion and worry that had deepened over the past 2 weeks. I see a man who was drowning and kept swimming anyway. A father who would do anything for his daughter. A person who showed up for a fake relationship and stayed for the real one. The real one is better. The real one is terrifying. Her smile was tremulous but genuine. But I'm choosing it anyway. I'm choosing you. Jake kissed her again, deeper this time, with the weight of everything they'd been through and everything still to come. When they finally pulled apart, Raina was smiling. So what happens now? She asked. Now we figure it out, day by day, together. Together, she agreed. I think I can manage that. Through the window, the morning sun was rising over the city. Somewhere in the penthouse, Maddie was probably waking up, looking for breakfast and cartoons and the daily dose of wonder that children demanded from the world. And here, in this hospital room, 2 broken people were choosing to heal together. It wasn't the story either of them had planned. But sometimes the best stories were the ones you never saw coming. 3 months later, Raina took her first steps without the walker. Jake was there, of course. He was always there. Had been since the hospital, through the surgeries and setbacks, and the grueling physical therapy sessions that left her exhausted and frustrated, and sometimes in tears. He'd held her hand through the hardest days, celebrated the smallest victories, and never once suggested that her recovery was taking too long. The physical therapist counted down as Raina released her grip on the parallel bars. 3, 2, 1. Okay, let go whenever you're ready. Raina's knuckles were white, her jaw clenched with concentration. Jake stood at the end of the bars, 10 feet away. An impossible distance, a marathon in a world measured by inches. You've got this, he said quietly. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who might faceplant into linoleum. If you faceplant, I'll catch you. From 10 feet away? I'm very fast. Despite her nerves, Raina laughed. And in that moment of distraction, her hands released the bars. The first step was tentative, her left leg, the stronger one, testing the ground like it might give way. The second was steadier. By the third, she'd found a rhythm, her body remembering movements it had known since childhood but had to relearn from scratch. 5 steps. 6. 7. Jake's face swam into view, his eyes bright with unshed tears. You're doing it, he breathed. Don't. She gritted her teeth. Don't jinx it. 8 steps. 9. And then she was there, collapsing into his arms, her legs trembling with exertion, but holding. I did it, she gasped. You did it. Jake held her close, mindful of her still healing body, but tight enough that she could feel his heart racing against hers. I knew you would. You know everything, apparently. Only the important things. The physical therapist was applauding, making notes on her clipboard, saying something about milestones and progress, and scheduling the next session. But Raina barely heard her. All her attention was on the man holding her up. The man who had been holding her up, in one way or another, since the day they met. I want to go home, she said. The penthouse? No. She pulled back slightly, meeting his eyes. Home. I want to go home. Jake understood what she meant. She could see it in his expression, the recognition, the hope, the careful restraint of someone who didn't want to push. Are you sure? He asked. I've been sure for weeks. I was just waiting until I could walk there myself. The penthouse had been their refuge during her recovery, accessible, secure, equipped with everything she needed, but it had never been home. It was a monument to her old life, the life she'd built in the years after Daniel, when success was a substitute for happiness and square footage was a measure of worth. That wasn't who she wanted to be anymore. I found a place, she said, a house in Westchester, 3 bedrooms, big yard, good school district. It needs work, but you found a house? I've been looking online during physical therapy sessions, when I got bored of the exercises. She smiled at his expression. Don't look so shocked. I'm still a CEO. I can multitask. Jake shook his head slowly, but he was smiling. A house in Westchester. 20 minutes from the city, close enough for work, far enough to feel like somewhere else. She touched his face. Close enough for you to commute to whatever job you decide you want. I told you, I'm not taking a job from you. I'm not offering a job. I'm offering options. Her voice softened. You've been taking care of me for 3 months. Taking care of Maddie. Putting your life on hold, that can't go on forever. It's not on hold, this is my life. But you need more than just being my caretaker and Maddie's dad. You need something that's yours. Jake was quiet for a moment, processing. She knew him well enough now to recognize the signs. The slight furrow of his brow, the way his eyes went distant when he was thinking through something complicated. What if I told you I've been thinking about that? He said finally. I'd say it's about time. Remember when I told your parents I was a furniture designer? Your fake cover story. You were very convincing. It wasn't entirely fake. He helped her to a chair, making sure she was steady before continuing. Before I met Sarah, I was studying woodworking. Wanted to open my own shop someday. Make custom pieces, one-of-a-kind stuff. Then life happened. Sarah's illness, Maddie, the need for steady income, and I put it away. But lately I've been sketching again. Designs for things. A crib for... He stopped abruptly, color rising to his cheeks. A crib for what? Nothing. Forget it. But Raina was already smiling. Jake Carter, were you designing furniture for a baby that doesn't exist? It's just sketches. Sketches for a hypothetical future baby. Purely theoretical. But he was smiling too, embarrassed and hopeful in equal measure. I wasn't assuming anything. The design came to me and I drew it and... Raina silenced him with a kiss. Show me the house, she said when they parted. Show me the house and we'll talk about all of it. The furniture shop, the theoretical baby, everything. Everything? Everything. Jake helped her to her feet and together they walked out of the physical therapy clinic. Slowly, carefully, but under her own power. It felt like a beginning. The house was exactly what Raina had described. A Victorian fixer-upper with a wraparound porch, a yard that sprawled in all directions, and enough character to last a lifetime. The paint was peeling, the garden was overgrown, and at least 2 windows were cracked. But standing in the driveway looking up at its weathered facade, Jake felt something he hadn't felt in years. Possibility. What do you think? Raina asked. She was leaning on a cane now, progress from the walker, but still necessary, watching his face with barely concealed anticipation. I think it needs a lot of work. That's what I thought too. And then I realized, she took his hand. I want to be someone who does work, real work, with my hands on something tangible, not just running companies and closing deals. You want to renovate a house? I want to build a life. This is just where it happens. She squeezed his hand. What do you say? Want to build something with me? Jake looked at the house, then at Raina, then at Maddie, who was already exploring the yard with the boundless energy of childhood. Daddy, Maddie called from somewhere around the corner. There's a tree. A real tree with branches for climbing. Don't climb anything yet, Jake shouted back. I'm just looking, Raina laughed. She's going to climb it the second we turn our backs. Probably. Jake turned back to her. This is really what you want? A fixer-upper in the suburbs with a convenience store clerk and his daughter? You're not a convenience store clerk. You're a furniture designer who hasn't started yet. Raina's expression was serious now, her eyes searching his face. And yes, this is what I want. You and Maddie and this ridiculous house and a life that's real instead of just successful. Those aren't mutually exclusive, you know. Maybe not, but I've had success without reality. It was empty. She stepped closer, careful on her healing legs. I don't want empty anymore. I want full, messy and complicated and full. Jake kissed her, gently, reverently, with all the love he'd been holding back out of fear that it was too soon, too much, too fragile. Okay, he said when they parted. Okay? Let's build something. They bought the house that week. The following months were a whirlwind of construction and renovation and the particular chaos of building a life from scratch. Jake discovered he remembered more about woodworking than he'd thought, and the skills came back quickly as he refinished floors, built shelves, crafted a dining table from reclaimed barnwood that became the heart of their kitchen. Raina split her time between physical therapy, remote work for Vail Technologies, and surprisingly competent assistance with home projects. She couldn't do heavy lifting, but she had an eye for design and a determination that refused to accept half measures. This paint color is wrong, she announced one Saturday, standing in what would become Maddie's room. It's the paint you picked. I was wrong. It needs to be softer, less pink, more blush. Jake set down his brush. We've already done 2 coats. Then we'll do 3 more with a better color. She caught his expression and sighed. I know, I'm being impossible. You're being thorough. There's a difference. Is there? A small one, but it's there. He crossed to her, pulling her into a paint-smeared embrace. For what it's worth, I think you're right. The pink is too aggressive. It's not aggressive. It's enthusiastic. It's screaming at us. Raina laughed, that full, surprise sound he'd never tire of hearing. Fine, we'll repaint, but you're explaining to Maddie why her room isn't ready yet. Deal. Maddie, as it turned out, didn't care about paint colors. She cared about the tree in the backyard, the neighborhood children she was meeting, and the room that would eventually be hers, regardless of what shade the walls were. Can I have a bunk bed? She asked one evening over dinner. So my friends can sleep over? You want friends sleeping over already? Jake raised an eyebrow. You've lived here 3 weeks. Emma from next door is my best friend now, and her dog is named Biscuit, and he's the cutest dog in the world. And can we get a dog too? A dog is a big responsibility. I'm responsible. Maddie's expression was earnest. I feed Mr. Trumpet every day. Mr. Trumpet is a stuffed elephant. He still needs feeding. Raina caught Jake's eye across the table, fighting a smile. She has a point about responsibility. You're supposed to be on my side. I'm on the side of logical arguments, and she's making a compelling case. Maddie beamed. See? Raina thinks I should have a dog. Raina thinks you're making a compelling case. That's different from thinking you should have a dog. But you'll consider it? Maddie's eyes were huge, wielding cuteness like a weapon. Please, Daddy? Jake sighed, the sigh of a man who knew he was going to lose this battle eventually. I'll consider it. Yay! Maddie was out of her chair and hugging him before he finished speaking. Thank you, Daddy. You're the best daddy in the world. I didn't say yes, but you're going to. She kissed his cheek and bounded off to continue whatever project she'd been working on upstairs. Jake turned to Raina. We're getting a dog, aren't we? Almost certainly. And a bunk bed. Probably. And approximately whatever else she asks for, because neither of us can say no to her. Raina reached across the table, taking his hand. We might need to work on that. Later, much later. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to Maddie's footsteps overhead and the evening sounds of their half-finished house. Through the window, the sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and rose, and Jake found himself marveling at how much had changed. 6 months ago, he'd been drowning, working nights at a convenience store, barely keeping his head above water, answering a Craigslist ad out of desperation. Now he was here, in a house he was building with his own hands, with a woman who had seen past his circumstances to the person underneath, with a daughter who was thriving in ways he'd been afraid to hope for. What are you thinking about? Raina asked. How grateful I am. Grateful for what? Everything. He brought her hand to his lips. You, this. The fact that you posted that ridiculous ad and I was desperate enough to answer it. It wasn't that ridiculous? You were looking for a fake boyfriend on Craigslist. It was a little ridiculous. It worked, didn't it? Jake couldn't argue with that. It had worked spectacularly, impossibly, against all odds. I love you, he said. I love you too. They cleared the dishes together, moving around each other with the easy choreography of people who had learned each other's rhythms. And when Maddie came back downstairs asking for a bedtime story, they both went up together, a family ritual that had evolved naturally, without anyone planning it. This, Jake thought as he watched Raina read to his daughter, her voice soft in the lamplight. This is what I almost missed. This is what I almost lost. He would never take it for granted. The trial of Victor Westridge began in the fall. Raina had dreaded it for months, the necessity of reliving that night, of testifying about threats and violence and the moment she'd felt herself falling through broken glass. But when the day came, she discovered something unexpected. She wasn't afraid. She had Jake beside her, a steady presence in the gallery. She had Eleanor and Richard, who had flown in to offer support. She had the knowledge that Westridge was already beaten, the evidence overwhelming, his empire crumbled, his associates turning on him one by one. She had survived. That was what mattered. Ms. Vale, the prosecutor began, can you describe in your own words what happened on the night of October 15th? Raina described it. The confrontation. The recording. Westridge's fury when he discovered the wire. The moment he'd grabbed her, his hands on her shoulders, the window shattering as she hit it, the horrifying sensation of falling. What do you remember about the fall itself? Fragments. She kept her voice steady, though her hands trembled slightly in her lap. I remember the glass, the cold air, the certainty that I was going to die. But you didn't die. No, there was construction equipment on a lower floor, a scaffold. I hit it. She paused. The doctors called it a miracle. I call it luck. And during the fall, in those moments when you believed you were going to die, what were you thinking? The courtroom was silent. Even the defense attorney had stopped his usual fidgeting. I thought about the people I loved, Raina said quietly. My parents, She glanced at Jake in the gallery. The man I was falling in love with, his daughter, who had already lost her mother and didn't deserve to lose anyone else. And is that man in the courtroom today? Yes. She kept her eyes on Jake. He's right there. The jury followed her gaze. Several of them smiled softly. No further questions. The defense attorney tried to pick apart her testimony, suggesting she'd provoked Westridge, implying the fall had been accidental, painting her as a corporate predator who had driven a competitor to desperate measures. But Raina had faced tougher opposition in boardrooms. She answered each question calmly, precisely, never losing her composure. And when it was over, when she stepped down from the witness stand, Jake was waiting. You were incredible, he said. I was terrified. You didn't look terrified. I've had practice. She leaned into him, drawing strength from his presence. Is it over? The testimony is. The trial will take a few more weeks. He stroked her hair. But you've done your part. Now we wait. They waited. The jury deliberated for 4 days. On the 5th day, the verdict came. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder, criminal threatening, conspiracy to commit corporate espionage. The sentence would be determined later, but the experts predicted decades. Decades. Raina heard the verdict in the courtroom, surrounded by people who had supported her through the darkest months of her life. She didn't cry. She'd done enough crying, but she felt something release in her chest. A tension she'd been carrying since that night finally letting go. It was over. Westridge was led away in handcuffs, looking older and smaller than she remembered. He didn't meet her eyes as he passed. How do you feel? Jake asked as they left the courthouse. I don't know. She stopped on the steps, looking out at the city. The same city where she'd built an empire, nearly died, and found love in the most unlikely place imaginable. Free, maybe. Like I can finally stop looking over my shoulder. You can. He's gone. He's gone. She repeated it like a mantra, trying to make it real. He's actually gone. Jake pulled her close, right there on the courthouse steps, with cameras flashing and reporters shouting questions. He didn't care about the spectacle. He only cared about her. "Let's go home," he said. "Yes." Raina smiled, a real smile, unguarded and bright. "Let's go home." The months that followed were quiet in the best possible way. Jake opened his furniture shop in a converted barn on their property. A modest beginning, but within weeks he had more commissions than he could handle. Word had gotten out about the widower who'd rescued a billionaire, the love story that had captivated the tabloids, and suddenly everyone wanted a piece of their fairy tale. Jake took it in stride. He built what he could, turned down what he couldn't, and focused on quality over volume. Each piece that left his shop was a work of art and a testament to the life he was building. Raina continued running Veil Technologies, but with a different approach. She hired a co-CEO to handle day-to-day operations and shifted her focus to innovation and philanthropy. The company's profits funded schools and hospitals and programs for single parents struggling to make ends meet. "You're changing the world," Jake told her one evening, reviewing the latest grant proposals. "I'm trying to deserve the second chance I got." "You don't have to deserve it. That's not how second chances work." "Maybe not, but I want to anyway." Maddie thrived. The house in Westchester became the home she'd never known she needed, complete with the tree for climbing, the bunk bed for sleepovers, and eventually a golden retriever named Sunshine, who Raina pretended to resist but secretly loved more than anyone. "She sleeps on our bed," Jake complained one morning, finding dog hair on his pillow. "She gets cold. She has fur. Emotional cold." Raina scratched behind Sunshine's ears. "You understand, don't you, girl?" The dog's tail wagged enthusiastically. Jake sighed. "I've been replaced." "Never." Raina kissed his cheek. "But you might have to share." And so he did. He shared his life with a woman he'd met through a Craigslist ad, a daughter who grew more remarkable every day, a dog who stole his pillow, and a house full of love and chaos and the particular magic of found families. It was messy. It was complicated. It was everything he'd never known he wanted. 1 year after they'd met, Jake stood in the backyard of their fully renovated home, watching Maddie chase Sunshine through the autumn leaves. Raina was beside him, her recovery complete, her limp barely noticeable, her spirit fully restored. "I have something for you," he said. "Oh?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box, the same kind of box that had held Sarah's ring all those years ago. But this ring was new, designed by Jake himself, crafted from white gold and set with a stone the exact color of Raina's eyes. "Jake, let me say this." He took a breath, trying to remember the speech he'd prepared and finding it completely inadequate. "A year ago, I was broken, drowning. I thought my life was over, that I'd spend the rest of my days just surviving, never actually living. And then you posted an ad for a fake boyfriend, and I was desperate enough to answer it, and everything changed." Raina's eyes were bright with tears, but she didn't interrupt. "You saved me," Jake continued. "I know you think I saved you, that I helped you through the recovery and the trial and everything else. But the truth is, you saved me first. You reminded me that love was possible, that hope was possible, that building something new didn't mean forgetting what came before." "Jake, I'm not asking you to replace Sarah. I'm not trying to recreate what I had. I'm asking for something different, something ours." He opened the box, revealing the ring. "Raina Vale, will you marry me?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she took the box, examined the ring, and then looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Did you make this?" "Yes." "It's beautiful. Is that a yes?" "I'm getting there." But she was smiling now, tears streaming down her face. "When I posted that ad, I was looking for a prop, an accessory to make my parents happy. I never imagined—" She shook her head. "I never imagined finding the person who would make me happy." "Is that a yes?" "It's context." She slipped the ring onto her finger. A perfect fit, because of course he'd gotten it right. "And yes, I'll marry you." Jake pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet despite her protests, spinning her in a circle while Maddie shrieked with excitement in the background. "Daddy, are you and Raina getting married?" "We are, sweetheart." "Can I be the flower girl?" "You can be whatever you want." "I want to be the flower girl and the ring bearer and the person who plays music." "That might be a lot." "I can handle it. I'm very responsible." Raina laughed, wiping tears from her face. "She has a point." "She always has a point. That's the problem." Maddie came running across the yard, sunshine bounding beside her, and threw herself into their embrace. For a moment, the three of them, four, counting the dog, stood together in the autumn light, a picture of the family they had become. "I love you both," Maddie announced, "and Sunshine, and our house, and everything." "We love you too, sweetheart." Jake kissed the top of her head. "More than anything." "More than ice cream?" "Even more than ice cream." "Wow." Maddie's voice was awed. "That's a lot." Raina caught Jake's eye, and they shared a smile. The smile of two people who had found each other against impossible odds and were still amazed by their luck. The wedding was in spring, a small ceremony in their backyard, under the tree Maddie had claimed as her own. Eleanor and Richard came from Seattle. Mrs. Patterson was given a seat of honor. Marcus Chen stood as Jake's best man, having become a genuine friend during the chaos and its aftermath. Raina wore white, simple, and elegant. Jake wore a suit he'd bought new, not from Goodwill, though Raina insisted she'd loved the Goodwill shirt that started it all. Maddie was indeed the flower girl, the ring bearer, and the person who selected the music, an eclectic mix of Disney songs and classical pieces that somehow worked perfectly. And when the officiant asked if anyone objected, Sunshine barked once and then settled down, apparently satisfied. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." The kiss was soft, sweet, and full of promise. Around them, their guests applauded. Above them, the spring sun painted everything in gold. Later, after the dinner and the dancing and the cake that Maddie had designed herself, Jake found a moment alone with his new wife. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Happy?" Raina leaned against him, watching their guests mingle in the fading light. "Terrified, grateful, overwhelmed." "That's a lot of feelings." "I'm a complicated person." "I know. It's one of the things I love about you." She turned to face him, her expression suddenly serious. "Jake, I need you to know something." "What?" "Whatever happens next, whatever challenges we face, whatever life throws at us, I'm not running. I spent 3 years hiding from the world, and I'm done with that. I'm here. I'm staying. No matter what." Jake cupped her face in his hands. "I know." "You don't know. You can't know, but I need to say it anyway." Her voice was fierce. "I choose this. I choose you and Maddie and this life we're building. I choose it every day, and I'll keep choosing it even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." "I choose you too." He kissed her forehead. "Every day. Always." They stood in silence, watching the sunset paint their world in shades of gold and rose. In the distance, Maddie was teaching Eleanor how to dance while Richard filmed on his phone. Sunshine had found a comfortable spot under a table and was snoring contentedly. Everything was exactly as it should be. "I have one more surprise," Jake said. "Another one? The wedding wasn't enough? This one's different." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I found this in my drawer yesterday. The original Craigslist listing. The one you posted." Raina took the paper, unfolding it carefully. "You kept this?" "I printed it the night before we met. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted proof that I hadn't imagined the whole thing." He watched her read the words. "It's strange to look at now. How clinical it sounds. How transactional." "It was transactional. That's what I thought I wanted." "And now?" Raina looked up at him, the listing still in her hands. "Now I want to burn it." "Really?" "It's a reminder of who I was. Someone who thought she could buy connection. Someone who was so afraid of being vulnerable that she turned love into a business deal." She crumpled the paper. "I don't want to be that person anymore." Jake took the crumpled paper from her hands. "Then let's burn it together." They found a fire pit and matches. They stood side by side, watching the paper catch flame, curling and blackening until nothing remained but ash. "That's it," Raina said. It's gone. The paper is gone. The story isn't. Jake pulled her close. The story is just beginning. They walked back to their guests, back to their daughter, back to the life they had built from desperation and hope, and the particular alchemy of two broken people choosing to heal together. The night ended with Maddie asleep in Jake's arms, exhausted from dancing and excitement. Raina walked beside them through the darkened house, turning off lights and collecting abandoned champagne glasses. She's wonderful, Raina said quietly, looking at the sleeping child. She is. I know I'm not her mother. I would never try to replace Sarah. You're not replacing anyone. You're adding to what she has. Jake adjusted his grip on Maddie's sleeping form. She loves you, you know. She told me last week that she's glad you're her bonus mom. Bonus mom. Her words. I think she heard it somewhere and decided it fit. Raina's eyes glistened. Bonus mom. I like that. They put Maddie to bed together, a ritual they'd developed over months of practice. Jake tucked the blankets around her while Raina arranged Mr. Trumpet and Princess Rainbow in their designated spots. Sunshine patted in and curled up at the foot of the bed, completing the picture. Good night, sweetheart, Jake whispered. Good night, bonus mom, Maddie murmured, already half asleep. Raina's breath caught. She leaned down and pressed a kiss to Maddie's forehead. Good night, baby girl. They stood in the doorway for a moment, watching their daughter sleep, the child who had brought them together as much as any Craigslist ad. Then they walked to their own room, to their own bed, to the rest of their lives. 5 years later, the house in Westchester had evolved. Jake's workshop had expanded twice. The yard now held a swing set, a sandbox, and a vegetable garden that Raina tended with surprising dedication. The tree Maddie had claimed still stood proud, now with a treehouse Jake had built with his own hands. And in the nursery, painted the perfect shade of blush, after much debate, a crib held their newest addition. She looks like you, Jake said, watching his infant daughter sleep. She has your eyes. She has Maddie's nose. Maddie doesn't have a distinctive nose. She does now. Raina laughed softly, leaning against him. We made a person. We did. A whole tiny person. I know. It's terrifying. It really is, but she was smiling. Also wonderful. Also wonderful. They stood in silence, watching Charlotte Sarah Carter breathe, named for Raina's grandmother and Jake's first wife, a bridge between past and present, loss and hope. In the hallway, 11-year-old Maddie crept past, pausing at the nursery door. Is she still sleeping? Always, Jake said. It's what babies do. She's kind of boring. She'll get more interesting. Promise? Promise. Raina held out her hand. Want to help me make breakfast? Maddie's face lit up. Can we make the special pancakes, the ones with the faces? Of course, it's a special day. What's special about it? Raina looked at Jake, at Charlotte, at the house they'd built from nothing. Everything, she said. Everything is special about it. They went downstairs together, Maddie chattering about pancake shapes and whether baby Charlotte would eventually like chocolate chips as much as she did. Sunshine followed at their heels, tail wagging, eager for whatever scraps might fall her way. Jake lingered in the nursery a moment longer. He looked at his daughter, this new life that was somehow both miracle and ordinary, extraordinary and everyday. Your sister is going to teach you everything, he whispered. Your mom is going to love you fiercely, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life being grateful that I answered a ridiculous Craigslist ad. Charlotte stirred in her sleep, one tiny hand flexing against the blanket. I know, Jake said. It doesn't make sense to me either, but here we are. He kissed her forehead and went downstairs, following the sound of laughter and the smell of pancakes, toward the family he'd never imagined and now couldn't imagine living without. The fake boyfriend contract had ended long ago. But the love story, the real one, the messy and complicated and impossibly beautiful one, was just getting started, and Jake intended to spend the rest of his life writing it,